Hello there and welcome to another edition of the Robot Wars tier lists. And this time we've got a massive one. And I actually think this is the longest, in fact the biggest of the Robot Wars competitor tier lists, because Series 3 has the most competitors out of any other Robot Wars season. I think the only other season that really compares to this is Series 7. Just like Series 3, it has 8 robots in its 16 heats and side events and even a World Championship. However, Series 3 doesn't just have a World Championship. It also has a Middleweight Championship. It also has football. And it has pinball. It has several Walker battles as well. And an international championship. So yeah, Series 3 has so many competitors. So many, in fact, that this tier list is slightly different to some of the others. We got S tier, which is the best of the best. The A tier, which is very, very good. The B tier is new. B tier is basically where, it just manages to pass on the design and the effectiveness, but it doesn't just get into the higher categories just yet. Obviously, we got great design, but ineffective. In other words, robots that look good but aren't very good, aren't very powerful or reliable in any sense. And Series 3, as I've discovered, or as I've had like a test through of all the robots, has a lot of robots which fit into that category where it's a great design but really ineffective. On the flip side, however, you got the effective robots which just weren't very good looking. They were very ugly. They were very boring. They were just very basic looking robots. D tier are the more lower end robots. They're not completely awful, but they're just not very good. F tier is the worst of the worst. They're the ones that absolutely suck. There's nothing redeemable about them. And then you got U tier. U tier is for the unrankables. This is robots which appear, quote unquote, but they either appeared in highlights or they didn't really appear at all because they had to withdraw or something like that. And there's only one robot in Series 3 which had that issue. Every other robot, on the other hand, appeared. And so I don't know how long this is going to take. This is actually being recorded during nighttime. So yeah, let's start off the list with 101. Now, 101, we saw Robodoc in the previous series. Robodoc was a very good design. I really loved the look of Robodoc. There was a few issues, though. It had that gigantic gap in the side, and it had that weird lifter. It just looked very awkward in design. But 101 completely changed that. It's a much more streamlined design, and what a beautiful looking robot. Like, 101 is one of my favorite designs, and it's a very simple design. Like, it's just a very, it's basically a box with tracks in essence. I mean, it's not proper box, it's slightly sloped in a way, and it's got a spike. But this simplicity made it just all around better because it was very effective. It was a very good pusher. It gave Hypno-Disc quite a scare. It was able to be so tough that Hypno-Disc couldn't damage it. Like, this robot was really tough, and this is 101 at probably its best. Although 101 never really changed its design over the years, but still I really like it. And I even like the different versions of 101. So there was another version which had like a dark green sides, which made it almost look like a tank in a way. But still, 101 already S tier, absolutely amazing robot, fantastic. Next up is AKO, a middleweight, the first of the middleweights. I've never really liked A-Kill's design. I've always found A-Kill to be kind of a dull looking, like a really weird looking design. It's a green box with like these weird spike hand arm things and a big like thing on the back. Even the Series 6 version just looked really odd, the heavyweight version. Yeah, A-Kill, I've never really been a fan of the design, but in terms of effectiveness, he was pretty effective. He was one of the only middleweights to survive till the very end, and he even fought in the War of Independence battle between it and Tentamushi in the International Championship. So, it was a very effective robot, just a very ugly looking robot. I've never really found A-Kill that appealing. It's, effective, but very poor design, in my opinion. On the flip side, you have Abaddon. Now, Abaddon is the longest robot in Robot Wars history. That's quite impressive, although the image doesn't really show its length. I can assure you it was a very long robot. Now, initially, Abaddon had a bowling ball at the end of its tail, but because of the weight restrictions and other issues, it had to be removed and was replaced with these caster wheels, which just didn't work. And even if it did have the bowling ball, I don't think it would have been that effective. The circular saw blade discs at the front, they didn't look very good, let's just say. And the robot itself actually looks really cool. I love the color scheme. I love the big wheels. I love the look of it. It looks great. This is what I mean by a great design, but really ineffective, because it just would not work at all, this robot. So yeah, Abaddon, right there. Agent Orange. Now, Agent Orange is somewhat unlucky, if you really think about it, because it failed to qualify for Series 4, which comes afterwards. And it's a real shame. It was meant to fight in a tag team alongside Millie Ambug, I believe. But that event got cancelled. And it's a shame because I think Agent Orange looks fantastic. I think it's a really good looking robot. And in terms of effectiveness, even though we didn't get much because it was up against a max damage, which was already dead from the get-go, and then it faced Blade, and Blade was a little bit more powerful than this, I think Agent Orange just looks nice, and it wasn't too bad in terms of effectiveness. Its weaponry is quite cool. I love the claw with the little eyes on the front. I love the axe as well. It looks great. Overall, the color scheme is fantastic. I love the fact that it's got a clockwork orange text for Agent Orange. Agent Orange, yeah, this is very good robot, very good looking. It's not the best necessarily, but it's still decent. I think it goes in B tier. I think that's a fair judgment. Agrobot, the first Agrobot. And it's interesting to think that this version of Agrobot, despite it being the most primitive, is also the most successful of the Agrobot machines. Now, it is successful in quotation marks. And the thing about Agrobot is Series 3 was the first ever series of rules I ever saw. And I can always remember the first battle, the first episode that I saw, and it was the Razor versus Agrobot battle. I remember being young and seeing that battle on the TV, and it still remains one of my favorite battles. It was, this series in general remains one of my favorite seasons, and so I do have a bit of a soft spot for a lot of them. And Agrobot, it's a very, very good looking robot. I think it's a very, I love the paint scheme. I love the look of this thing. In terms of effectiveness, however, Agrobot didn't really do much in its free battles. And this is sort of the opposite problem with Agent Orange, where Agent Orange at least tried to do stuff. Agrobot, on the other hand, is up against Binky in the first battle, and Binky didn't really do anything. That thing was just useless. And then in the Razor fight, Razor dominated the fight and then basically self-immobilized itself by celebrating too early and got itself impaled on the arena floor. And then it was up against Blade, and Blade just bulldozed it. Poor Agrobot didn't really do much, but in terms of design, I think Agrobot is beautiful looking. Very ironically, this is the most successful version, but I love it. And it's actually got the beast-like look at its best here compared to the Series 4, the Extreme, or the Series 7 versions of Agrobot. And next up is the first of the football competitors, Alien. Alien, now not to be confused with the Series 5, the Alien, the one that's often seen at the live events on display. The Alien, or this Alien... This Alien isn't as good as the Alien. My God. It's a green box wedge design with an alien face on the front. A gigantic ground clearance at the front end. And it's for some reason sloped at the back. That makes no sense. It's a very ugly looking robot. This is F tier. This is just F tier. This one just... It's just dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. It tipped itself over. If I can recall, it drove her arena spike and tipped itself over. It wasn't very well controlled. It wasn't very good. Ortalk is improved from last time. Ortalk last time I thought was a very ugly looking robot. But Ortalk in Series 3 I think is a far better looking robot. And I think the interchangeable scoop with it, having this scoop and then the triangular scoop that you see in the World Championship, I think both look fantastic on it. Ortalk was a very speedy and aggressive machine. It it looked great. It was a massive improvement over the previous wars. It's a shame that it made Thing 2 because Thing 2 basically killed off its chances at progressing further, which is a real shame because I think All Talk is one of those robots where you can tell this was a robot that could have gone a little bit further had it had better circumstances. But unfortunately, it met Thing 2 in the second round, and, well, the rest is history. And then in the World Championship, it met Razor, and as soon as it met Razor, it was done for, which is a real shame because I think All Talk is a very good machine. I like the color scheme as well, the scoop. I think the yellow turning orange with the red tip looks really nice. And I also, like I said, I love the horned, like, bull head that it can change into, even though that wasn't as good. But nonetheless, Alligator, spelled A-L-L-Y, and then Gator. Two separate words, believe it or not. Alligator, it doesn't really look like an alligator, but then again, you know, it's a decent-looking robot. I think it's okay-ish. In terms of effectiveness, it was quite slow around the arena, but it wasn't dreadful. It was able to, like, push around other robots, like Corporal Punishment. It was an okay robot, I think, Alligator, and, you know, it had no self-righting mechanism, and even if it beat Berserk II in its second round fight, it wouldn't have won against Hypno-Disc. Hypno-Disc would have killed it. Although saying that, maybe the Wedge might have done something. You never know. You never know. Well, Alligator, I think, is a B-tier robot. I think it looks great. I love the little mascot on the back. And even like the ridges on the back, you know, even though it doesn't look that much like an alligator, they did at least try with the sort of ridges at the back to make it look almost like an alligator's back, you know, or the what are they called, the scoots are they called? I don't remember. The first of the Walker battles robots, and this is Arachnid. Well, it's not called, no, Anarachnid, I think it's called. It's not necessarily called Arachnid, it's called Anarachnid or something like that. It's, yeah, it looks more like you know, the stereotypical, like, you know, what are they called? Little, like, robot bug things. Like, it actually looks more like that than it does like a spider. I mean, it's got more legs than a spider. I love the big goofy eyes, I will say that. But aside from that, it's a wooden box with a million legs that moved at, like, minus 10 miles per hour. Like, that's how useless this robot was. In fact, it got completely destroyed in its only battle because it didn't even touch Mammoth. So, objectively speaking, this is one of the worst robots to appear in Robot Wars. Subjectively speaking, I think it does have some charm to it, but it's not enough to put it in like the great design because it's still, yeah. Anorachophobia. I mean, it's still on the A's. God, there's quite a few A's, actually. Anorachophobia was the robot that fought the big cheese and was pitted quite dramatically. I love the look of this robot. The lovely sort of, like, it almost looks like a computer mouse, if you think about it. It looks like a mouse, you know, without, obviously, a wire. It's a wireless mouse. With a yellow pattern in front. I really love the look of this robot. In terms of effectiveness, it was very speedy, and it was one of those robots where it was too speedy for its own good. Like, it span around the arena so much that it really struggled to turn and face the opponent. Its axe was very fast and quite deadly, so I'll give it that. I think this is definitely a B tier robot. Like, the design is great, but the speed was, ironically enough, its hindrance. Like, this is a robot which, if it was slowed down a little bit, it probably would have been even better. Next up is Armageddon, an Axelbot. Now, Civ3 really did start off the Axelbot trend. There's quite a few, well, I mean, Civ2 had a few Axelbots in Wheeler-Source, but Civ3 was really the one which started it proper. With this robot, and it's quite interesting because Armageddon, for those who don't know, the team actually did return all the way into the reboot with a robot called Wraith, and Wraith appeared only in the pilot, which was unaired. Still unaired, in fact, unless Mech Plus decide to air it on their services. Armageddon, I think it looks great. I think the design is great, but in terms of effectiveness, this thing was useless. Like, this is borderline useless. It was slow. It struggled to really do anything. Like, the mace almost seemed like it was too heavy for the robot. It's a shame because when you look at it, it looks like a really great design. I love Axelbot designs. I love Frackbot designs, however you want to call it. And I think in terms of that, it looks decent. But effectiveness was about -10. Just use the same -10 joke. Atlas. Atlas is a very weird looking robot. I'm not going to lie. This is a very weird looking robot. It's not completely awful. It's not alien levels of bad, but it's still very awkward. It's actually by the same team that did FUD last year in the Super Heavyweight Championships. I said last year as if I'm speaking about this. I mean, it's II. But Atlas, I never understood its name. I've never understood its design. Its design is... I can sort of get why he's trying to go for. It's got a big circular saw on the back, and it's got a little scoop at the front. It's got this little like toy at the top, this like mech that's spinning around. That's kind of fun. Color scheme I don't hate. I think the color scheme is pretty cool, but at the same time, it's not the prettiest looking robot. It looks very trashy almost. Like it looks like it's made out of scraps. And if you can tell like a robot is made out of scraps, and you know, unless you're trying to do something like purposely scrappy, like something or something like that, you know, this one just doesn't look very good. I don't think Atlas looks that great. In terms of effectiveness, he wasn't that bad, but he wasn't great either. I think he's going to go in DT. He's better than Anarachnid, but worse than quite a few of the others. Speaking of great designs, Axios. Now this thing, I used to have the Robot Wars Club video or VHS. In fact, I still got it upstairs somewhere. And on that VHS, one of the things that I always remembered was seeing Axios in its fight against Panic Attack. And the way it's just thrown over and then Dead Metal just comes in and slams into it and sparks go flying. As it slams into it, it actually rolls over. It's pretty impressive stuff. Axios, I think the design is really unique. It's really cool looking. It's got these big wheels on the side, which kind of downgrades it a bit, but the color scheme is great and the paint job, it looks fantastic. It's got this big like tongue thing that sticks out and like fires out, and this big like arm spear, which I'm surprised they didn't use to self-right, come to think about it. But although maybe they couldn't do it. Yeah, maybe. But still, I think it's a very good-looking design. In terms of effectiveness, however, I wouldn't say it was that effective. It seemed like it struggled against Panic Attack. It seemed like it was not really able to get its weapons into play. Like that big spear thing, like it doesn't look like it's going to be able to actually go in and stab a robot. It's not... Yeah, the tongue is more powerful in this case, but yeah, Axios is definitely a great looking robot. It's just let down by its effectiveness. I'm going to put it in the higher than Agrobot. I think Agrobot is still great, but I think this is better. Backstabber is another one of these robots which look really good looking. I love the paint scheme. I love the color scheme. Once again, a very unique robot. Robot's uniqueness, which doesn't really make much sense when you get down to it. The funny thing about this robot is it looks almost 100% like Dominator 2. If you really think about it, like Backstabber looks just like Dominator 2. The shape, everything about it looks like Dominator 2. So, yes, Backstabber is unique in the sense that its axe is facing backwards. So, and well, to be fair, I think Beast used to do that as well. But basically, it would attack from behind as opposed to from the front, which I guess that's kind of a unique idea. But if you're in combat, you know, and you're going to face forwards, you got to face forwards and ram a robot and try to like hit them that way. I mean, that's what Dominator did and used the axe forward facing. Like, I don't think the backstabbing effectiveness would have been that great. I mean, it was quickly disposed of by Razor. Razor just slammed in and just pushed into the pit. But still, Backstabber is a great looking robot again, but its effectiveness is it just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. So, I've just realised we're on the bees. We only just made on the bees. So the next up is Beast Bobman. Now, Beast Bobman is the successor to Roadblock, which was the first Wars champion. Unlike Roadblock, this one actually has a flipper. or a little like lifter thing that flicks up, and any robot that goes across it, it just gets flown over. It also has a circular saw, and it has these eyes at the front. The design of this is fantastic, and even in terms of effectiveness, it wasn't too bad. I mean, it was able to flip certain robots over, and I think that was, and of course in this era, flipping is probably one of the best things you could do, because you could just take out any opponent and they would not be able to self-fight. However, it was slow. You see, the problem with Beast of Bobman, and even Robot for that matter, is that they didn't really improve the speed of the robot. They just sort of used the same robot every year. And by Series 3, robots were getting faster, and Beast of Bobman was just out-challenged by speedier robots. Luckily, it was faced up against a lot of robots which couldn't self-fight, so it was able to go through quite nicely. But then, as soon as it faced Steg-O-Saw-Us, who's much quicker, that's when you started seeing the problems. And even Onslaught, like, it struggled to catch it with Onslaught and had to catch it off guard with a flip. You know, so Beast of Bobman's slowness really does downgrade it a bit, but I think this is a really good-looking robot, and I think it's still very good, and I love the fact the eyes wink. The eyes winking just is so fantastic. It's so characteristic. Next up is Behemoth, and Behemoth has had a massive improvement over this previous year. Behemoth in Series 2 I've never really liked. I thought it was kind of like too scrappy for its own good. Like the "eat me" and "I'm done" like graffitied on the front just looked awful. But Series 3 Behemoth is a massive improvement. This version of Behemoth, I believe, is the one that appears pretty much in all the video games. It's sort of a mixture of this one and the Series 4 version. What I mean by that is it's got these two back axes, and in all the video games, they always kept the Series 3 Behemoth design while also using the Series 4 Behemoth scoop. I love the look of this Behemoth. This is the Behemoth which obviously stays on for the rest of the competition, basically, the rest of the years, the classic era. This one's a bit more square and less, round, if that makes sense. But it doesn't matter because it's just such a gorgeous looking robot. You look at this thing, it's just amazing. It's amazing. It's big, it's boisterous, it's got attitude, the color scheme is great, the weaponry is great. Everything about the Series 3 Behemoth is fantastic, and there's a good reason why this was runners-up in the First World Championship and almost beat Razor, because this thing was just that good. Like, this is definitely S tier. This is a massive improvement over the previous year, and it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Next up is Berserk II. Berserk 2 is one of those interesting cases. It's one of those interesting robots, in my opinion, that, how do I put it? They sort of ruined its successor, if that makes sense. Like, there are some robots in Robot Wars where they have a successor which is just infinitely worse than the previous one. And in Berserk 2's case, that is the situation. Like, the Series 4 version, when we get to Series 4, is absolutely atrocious. Because this one is just so good. Just look at it. I love the little, like, metal skull at the front. This thing was tough and really, and I mean tough. Like, it had armor that Hypno-Disc just couldn't get through. It did leave the odd gashes at the back. I love the fact that Berserk 2 is like written on the back in like this, like sketched out like laser print, and it looks so sexy. The color, the actual like metal, like the scratched metal look looks great. I love how characteristic it looks. The weaponry was very effective. The axe was, properly powerful. It just like hammered away. The lifter was also very, very good. Berserk 2, absolutely fantastic. I think this is a genuinely great robot. Absolutely wonderful. I think this is definitely deserving of an S tier. In fact, is it as good as 101? I'm going to put it in S tier. I think Berserk 2 in Series 3 is just a gorgeous looking robot. Just gorgeous. Speaking of great looking robots and predecessors to what would become fantastic machines, we have Bigger Brother, or in this case, Big Brother. Big Brother has a weapon similar to Sting, in the sense that it's got this like weird flail tail thing, which doesn't seem that very effective. But it also has a wedge, and you can almost sense like where the Bigger Brother, body is coming from, because the back end is definitely like looks like they've just cut it often used it as a flipper later on. I think this is a very good looking robot. I don't think it's the best looking of the Big Brother machines. I do think it's still decent. I think it's very effective. You know, it's speedy. It was very aggressive. Even the flail managed to get some action time. So yeah, still a very good robot. Just overall, I'm gonna put it just below Beast of Bobman. Next up is Binky. Binky is a classic case of where they're trying to be way too unique for its own good. And Binky is unfortunately an example of a robot which is just not very good. This robot basically has one wheel. I'm not even kidding. It has one wheel. And its body is meant to rotate, but also the whatever the hell that flipper thing is meant to be, that's also meant to rotate as well. Binky just it's a thing that exists. This replaced a robot called Daisy that was meant to have appeared in the show, but it basically couldn't. And I just remembered, I think I forgot to add Daisy onto this. Daisy would have gone in U anyway, so it's nothing to talk about. But Binky, on the other hand, we did see, and it was useless. It's a very hideous looking robot. It's got uniqueness, I guess, but yeah, like at least Alien has some competency in the sense that it's actually meant to do something. Binky can't do anything. Pardon. Blade, Series 3 had a lot of robots which are just called like Spike Blade or stuff like that. I just realised. Blade, I love the look of Blade. Once again, this is a great looking design. I love the sort of Y shape of Blade. The colour scheme looks fantastic. It's very shiny as well when you see it in the arena, and the lighting just shines off of it. It's got a lawnmower blade, which, funnily enough, I don't think the lawnmower blade ever actually worked. The lawnmower blade seemed like it was very ineffective. Despite this, it was a semi-finalist, and it was very successful, and it was very aggressive. Like, even though the lawnmower blade didn't really do anything, it made up for the fact that it was a very aggressive and speedy robot, very, brutal little thing. I think it's a decent little machine. I think it's better than Big Brother, personally, but that's just me. Brimher, based on the film Brimher. Brimher, it's a box with a spike. It's got 4 wheels that I presume was meant to make it invertible, but we didn't see anything of it. It was basically a robot that didn't work from the get-go. One of the issues that Series 3 had, and it's actually one of the big controversies around it, is there was a problem with the radio frequency in the arena, which meant that several robots were dead on arrival. They were basically dead robot standings. And Brimher was one of these robots. It just stood there dead from the get-go and didn't really do anything, which meant that we don't really have much to go on for Brimher. I assume it would have been like a Rambot, I presume. But yeah, Brimher we didn't see much of. Brimher is a very boring looking design. It's not very inspired. Yeah, I'm going to put it in D because there may have been some untapped potential there. But that's about it. Speaking of not effective, but great designs, but ineffective, the first Bulldog breed machine. Bulldog breed, we know from future versions of them, are absolutely wonderful robot, very brutal, very aggressive. However, the Series 3 version was not so much. It was, again, a very much a dead robot standing. However, it did get a little bit of movement, and it just still didn't work. Its blades didn't seem that effective, which is a real shame because when you look at the robot, it looks great. The paintwork of Bulldog breed looks fantastic, and even like the angle grinder for like the jaws, showing how aggressive this Bulldog is, looks great. Like, it's fantastic that they came back years later, or came back the following year, because a lot of these robots, they didn't come back. But with Bulldog breed, they actually did come back, and they actually came back with a much better machine. And then they improved again and improved constantly over the years, which is great. And even for their first robot, it may not have been that effective, but at least it was good looking. Bumblebot. Bumblebot returns from Series 2 as from reserve to main competition now. Unlike the Series 2 version, which had basically a hammer, this one has a large spiked axe. Pretty too big for its own good, I'd argue, but still, I guess the design's okay. It's nothing to write home about. I think I said before, it's definitely not the greatest looking robot in the world, but it's not the worst. I'm going to just put it in D. It's a high D tier, but it's D nonetheless. Alright, so next up is the C tier, and the C tier is Cassius II, starting off the Cs. Cassius II, now I've always debated whether or not Cassius II or Cassius I is better looking. Cassius I was certainly the more colourful looking, and I really like the look of it. Cassius II does have a good design, to be fair. I mean, I love, like I said Perspex armor is really a giveaway for how good looking a robot can be. Sometimes there are those which are just not very good looking, but then when they use it really effectively like Cassius does, it looks great. Its flipper was very powerful, even though we didn't really see much of it. And it is a shame that Rex Garrett had a protest regarding Series 3 and its health and safety concerns, so much so that he supposedly, and I think this is quote, don't quote me on this, but supposedly he did throw away the fight with Pussycat, which meant that we didn't see much of it, which is a real shame because it looked like a very powerful robot. I still debate whether or not I prefer this one or the Series 1 version. I mean, they both had the similar issues where they would bop up and down and their control would be very like iffy a bit. It's too fast for its own good, similar to Anarachnid. Which one am I talking about? Not Anarachnid. Anarachnophobia. That's who it is. Jesus. But still, good looking robot. Very decent machine. I'm going to put it in A tier because it's not S tier necessarily because there was still the odd issues. But still, good looking robot. Centurion. Ratate's first robot. I think this is Ratate's first robot. When did he was in Series 2 or 1? No, this is Ratate's first robot. Centurion is a unique looking robot. It's got a big axe. It looks really nasty with the axe, but it also has like forks, and somehow it got seeded for Series 4 later on, but hey. Centurion, it's an okay looking robot. I quite like the design. I like it's trying to look very like a Centurion, almost. It's almost like a helmet if you look at the design of the robot. It's quite unique in that sense. Design-wise, it looks great. I think the colour scheme looks all right. I love the little pattern on the side. The eyes look great. In terms of effectiveness, it wasn't too bad. It did have reliability issues, and this was also present later on in Series 4, but nonetheless, I think Centurion is decent enough to go into B tier. That's what I'm going to say. It's not high B tier, but it's still decent enough to go in B tier. Next up is Cerberus, and this is another example where a robot's best run was also its first run. Cerberus, this is probably the best looking of the Cerberus machines. I think the glossy paint job of it looks so gorgeous when you look at it. It looks so beautiful. The shininess of this version of Cerberus, it's a shame they got rid of that shininess in later adaptations. They sort of just made it very plain looking. It's a real shame. Well, they made it silver, which just took away the beauty of this first version. Cerberus was pretty effective in Civ 3. It was able to pull it was able to go against many other robots, push them about with their spike. It was meant to have a soul blade, and despite the fact that it even has soul blade in the official photos, it unfortunately had issues regarding the soul blade, so it was taken off, and so it's just got spikes. But nonetheless, I think Cerberus is a very gorgeous machine. It wasn't too bad either, and it did decently. I think Cerberus goes into A tier just because I think it looks really, really sexy, and I think it's better than most of these. I'm gonna put it there, right by Cassius. Speaking of a design which I think is far better is the Challenger 2 design. Challenger 1, I never really liked that design. I thought it was kind of basic, very dull looking. But Challenger 2 took that design and actually improved it. It's more or less the same shape, same sort of robot. But they've managed to make it look so much better. It's got this drum blade at the front, which looks really nasty and looks really good. Got rid of those stupid drills on the side, and now it's just static spikes, which actually looks so much better. It's got this sort of like spiked back, like mohawk on the back, which looks great. The bodywork is more to the ground, which is just as great. I think this is a very good looking robot. I think Challenger 2 definitely improved. Was it effective though? It didn't really do much in its first round battle, and in its second round battle, it was just pushed into the pit and then axed by Shunt. So which is a shame, because I think design-wise, it looks great. It's far better than the previous version, but that's about it. Next up is the champion of Series 3 and 2 times champion of the UK Robot Wars, Chaos 2. Chaos 2. Just a massive improvement over Chaos 1. Chaos 1 was very fast and it looked very good, but its flipper blade was so crap. It was like the Detour flipper in series, in this series and later adaptations, where it would just spring up once and then it would just take ages to come back down. It wouldn't just be very good. So they improved it. They gave it a much more high pressured flipper blade, and what an improvement it was. I love the black colour scheme of Chaos 2. I think that looks so gorgeous. I love the big Chaos 2 written on the front of the flipper. The flipper, this big wide thing, it looks great. The way it shines also, whenever Chaos 2 is in the light, there's always a shine. It's always across the middle and it looks so sexy. The Perspex back armor looks great. Everything about Chaos 2 just looks gorgeous, and it was just a beast of a machine. Deserving to be champion as well. S tier at the top. Chaos 2, wonderful. Right, next up is Corporal Punishment. Corporal Punishment has changed from the previous series. It doesn't have the claw design, which was a static spike, basically. Now it's just a wedge. It's basically the same robot, except they've changed the front end, which is now a scoop wedge, which isn't too bad. It almost looks like a discount La Machine in a way. Except La Machine was a very powerful robot. This wasn't. Well, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't as powerful as it could have been. Corporal Punishment was defeated by Alligator. Alligator was a far better wedge, basically. Which is a shame, because I think Corporal Punishment wouldn't have been too bad had it been in better circumstances. Still, I don't think it would have won against Hypno-Disc, just saying. That said, Corporal Punishment, decent looking robot. It wasn't that bad. I'm going to put it in B tier. Just very good all-around robot. Another great-looking robot, which was, unfortunately in this case, just taken out way too early, Crasher Nasher. I love the look of this robot. I think the design of it is so great. I love the big shark design. I love the big saw blade. It would have won. I don't think it would have won a single battle, mind, but still, the look of Crasher Nasher, it's amazing. I love the animal looking robots. I really do. And this is a great example of where it works so well. But yeah, we saw maybe like 1 second of it before it got flipped over by Firestorm. Yeah, I mean, at least it went out in like a blaze of glory. I'll give Crasher Nasher that. It went out in a blaze of glory. Great design, but ineffective. Definitely ineffective. Next up is Crippler. Crippler is one of the more forget-me robots of Series 3. It's a robot which got defeated by All Talk, which we've seen earlier. The robot, I guess, is somewhat unique. It's got all these different weapons. It's got a weapon on the back, weapon at the front, weapon on the sides, a big overarching axe. It's got this like samurai sort of look to it. I guess that's decent enough. I think the design is okay. It's not brilliant, but it's not dreadful either. I think it's in the same boat with Bumblebot, where it's not a dreadful design, but it's not great either. Effectiveness-wise, well, it had all these different weapons, but it was also very slow and wasn't very effective. Crippler, I'm going to put Crippler in a D tier, but it's a decent enough design, but it's not great design territory. Unlike Crocodiletron. I love my crocodiles. I love my alligators. I've even looked after crocodiles and alligators before, but Crocodiletron. I love the look of Crocodiletron. Unfortunately, Crocodiletron was the first victim of Chaos 2, and it was taken out way too quickly before we got the chance to really see what Crocodiletron was made of, although I don't think it would have won any fights, to be fair. It looked like it was there to just, have fun and just get demolished. I didn't put the joke bot category on this one because I thought to myself, well, a lot of the robots weren't necessarily joke bots, they were there for serious reasons. And Crocodiletron, it's a great design. I think even the weaponry was a great touch. The fact that it's a jaw that can slam down and crush a robot, that's great. It was not going to win any battles. It was able to get across the arena, so that was that. I love Crocodiletron. I genuinely really love Crocodiletron. I think it's one of the best designs in Series 3. It's just a shame they got taken out 10 seconds into the fight. So, Crusader. Now, a lot of people remember the Series 4 Crusader, and Crusader is one of those robots which a lot of people have a high regard to because it's one of those untapped potentials that was just so good when we saw it. It was a speedy robot. It wasn't necessarily the most well-controlled, but it had this really interesting-looking flipper arm on it. It was an invertible robot. I think the design of the Series 3 Crusader is an interesting design. I do think the Series 4 one is much better, but the Series 3 version is still very good nonetheless. It's a shame this one failed to qualify because, you got all these other robots like Crippled or, Binky, but Crusader failed to qualify and had to be reserved into the fucking pinball. What the hell? That really annoys me because we see in Series 4 just how good of a machine this was. It's a shame because I think Crusader is a great looking robot. I do think the Series 4 version is much better looking, but it's still great. I'm going to put it in A tier. I think it's deserving of A tier. Okay, Crusher. Crusher is one of those robots which I want to put quite highly. I want to put it, somewhere, in the higher categories because it wasn't bad. When you see it in its first fight, it was able to crush down and really do a number on Beast of Bobman. But at the same time, it barely moved and its track was so easily dislodged. The tracks are just so, the tracks are the biggest weakness here. Which is a real shame because I think design-wise it looks great. I think it looks like a really great robot. It does remind me of a robot you'd make in Arenas of Destruction or Extreme Destruction Mind, but I still like it. I think Crusher is one of those underrated one-time losers. It's one of those robots not a lot of people talk about, which is a shame because I think it's still decent. I'm gonna put it just in the great design category because it had potential. It just didn't really work out. Daisy Chopper. Daisy Chopper is the same team as the Caliban team. And now I know in the past, when I've done some of these rankings, I've gone on tangents about certain individuals or certain things that just really pissed me off, which I just feel like I have to talk about. The Daisy Chopper team is one such example. If you ever want to know the saltiest team on Robot Wars, the Daisy Chopper team is probably one of the saltiest ever. Imagine a team that is so bitter about losing that they actually call for a rematch and they lose this rematch again and still are bitter about it because they think that it's unfair, blah, blah, blah. It's not anyone's fault that your robot didn't work. Which is a shame because I think its design is great. I think the design looks decent. The team are shitheads, basically. They're a bunch of salty assholes, but design-wise, I think it looks great. If it was a slightly better, it probably would have been pretty cool to see. But unfortunately, it's just the disc is one of those paper discs where it's just it just spins so slowly and one tap and it just folds and just disables. It's a shame because I think design wise it's not too bad. Dark Destroyer. Dark spelled with an E, by the way. Because I believe it's the family name Dark. Dark, isn't that? And Dark Destroyer 1 is another example of a robot whose successor is just significantly worse than its predecessor. Because this one is so good looking. I love the look of Dark Destroyer. I love the sort of like Darth Vader sort of esque helmet or face at the front. I love that so much. I love the back end. I love the big, propeller blade at the back. Even though the propeller blade was useless because it hit a robot and then it would stop and work again. That's how useful, or useless I should say, the Dark Destroyer was. Dark Destroyer was a heat finalist, and I don't know whether it was deservingly a heat finalist, mind. It was a heat finalist nonetheless, but it did get defeated by a Gravedigger in the end, and I quite like Dark Destroyer. I still like it, even if I don't think it deserved to be a heat finalist. Effectiveness-wise, it wasn't that effective. It's a heat finalist that wasn't that effective, but it wasn't dreadful. I'm going to put Dark Destroyer in the great design, but ineffective category, and I'm going to put it right by Agrobot, because, just like Agrobot, it was a great looking robot, it just wasn't that great. Next up is Death Warmed Up, Team Death's second robot. They had Piece de Resistance in Series 2, this time it's Death Warmed Up, and Death Warmed Up is, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. It's a very goofy looking robot, I guess. It's got a big green-headed robot man sat on a thing, like a throne. I assume that's what it's meant to look like. It's got this sort of thing at the front. I don't know how to describe Death Warmed Up. It's a very odd-looking robot. It wasn't very effective. It's gonna go into the D tier. I mean, at least it's trying to be creative, I guess. Demolition Demon. Now, I'm surprised Demolition Demon did not get a place in Series 3, like the main championship, and was reserved instead for the side competitions, especially when it sort of got screwed over in Series 2 by the controversial Napalm battle. Demolition Demon 2, though, looking at it, I can sort of understand why they probably rejected it, because Demolition Demon 1 was just so good looking, and Demolition Demon 2 just looks... Why? What the fuck were they thinking with that design? It looks dreadful. It does. It looks awful. What the fuck? How do you have such a, decent looking robot previously and then change it into that? I don't even think it was that effective either. It was able to do stuff, I guess, but that's about it. It was able to move. That's the most positive thing I can say. Yeah, I'm disappointed in Demolition Demon. I really was disappointed with Demolition Demon. At least some of the others had some improvements, but this didn't. Alright, so last time I talked about, who was it? Philippa. Philippa, and this is its predecessor, Proposaurus Rex. You can almost tell that they're related robots when you just look at them, because they're very similarly designed. They're very long robots with a lift at the front. Proposaurus Rex. I really like the look of Proposaurus Rex. I think design-wise it looks great. I love the little eyes it's got on the side. I love that the flipper bit is teeth almost, and it's got a tail, which looks great. So characteristic. I really do think that's great. Effectiveness-wise, it was sort of a mixed bag. It was very slow, but it was able to lift robots up, and it was able to topple them, which is all things considered, that's pretty great. I think the Proposaurus Rex was a decent robot. I think it goes into B tier. I think it goes actually into B tier, and I think it's going to go quite highly in B tier. I'm going to put it right by Agent Orange, because I think it was very good. It's Detour. The first appearance of Detour. Now, it's not the first person of the team, because Nemesis was Series 1 and 2. However, Detour's first appearance in Robot Wars, and honestly, this is probably the best version of Detour if you really think about it, because this one not only got to the heat final, but it also did really well in the World Championship and the International Championship. In the International League, it was runners up, then lost to Razor. In the World Championship, it was in the final. It was in the top four, the final four. It lost to Behemoth, being flipped over. And design wise, it looks gorgeous. I love the look of Series 3 Detour. Series 3 Detour is probably one of my favorite Detour designs. Effectiveness-wise, yeah, it was a bit slow. Yeah, it was a bit bulky. Yeah, its flipper is spring-powered, but it's Detour. You can't help but love Detour. I love it. I genuinely love it. I'm actually going to put it in S tier because this is just such a fantastic-looking robot. It's a massive improvement over Nemesis. If we're going to go on that line, it's like Nemesis was great, but this is a massive improvement. Next up is Dominator. Now, Dominator didn't appear in the competition at first. It actually was a pinball-only robot, which is interesting considering, Dominator 2 would go on to be, 3 times semi-finalist. And this first version of Dominator is very unusual looking when you look at it because it's very, it's this black robot with, flames at the bottom and the big teeth on the front, and it has no weaponry. Compared to the Dominator 2, which is infamous for its big axe that just slams in and crushes robots underneath it. And Dominator 1, it was very flimsy though. It's got high ground clearance, and the house robots, when they tackled it, they just demolished it. It was effective though in the pinball. It was very effective. I'm not huge on the design, but I don't think it's that bad. I think it's B tier. I think it's very good B tier, like a mid B tier, because I think it's genuinely good, despite the fact that I'm a little bit not too keen on the design when it comes to the ground clearance and just the sort of armor plating. But aside from that, still a good robot. Speaking of a very improved robot, Dreadnought Series 1 and 2, I've always found the design to be okay-ish. And I quite like the yellow design. I quite like that Series 2 had a much better, bigger, bulkier, forks. This is a much more improved design, much more streamlined. I love the little alien on the back that is clawing into the back end of Dreadnought. I love that so much. It looks so great. I love the fact that it's been recolored and it's, got big forks at the front again. It's a far more reliable robot, this version of Dreadnought. Dreadnought improved massively over the years, and this is a very, very good looking Dreadnought, and I just think it's very good. I think it's A tier, but not brilliant A tier, if that makes sense. It's bottom end. Next up is Loco. No, it isn't. Is it not? No, it's not Loco. It's Dundee. The previous robot was Loco. Dundee. It's another crocodile robot, shaped robot. However, unlike Crocodiletron, which looked wonderful, this doesn't. I hate the look of it. I hate the lifter saw blade jaws. Those look awful. The big eyes aren't that great. You look at this in Crocodiletron, you can tell one looks wonderfully amazing and really well crafted, and this one just doesn't look as great. It was defeated by Cassius, and whilst it wasn't too bad, I guess its design is not the prettiest. I'm not a fan of the saw blade inside the mouth thing, inside flippers. I think that's such a stupid design idea, in my opinion. I really don't understand why so many robots had that design. It never worked. And it's, why bother doing something that doesn't work? And I'm not really a fan of its shape, but it wasn't too bad, I guess. I'm going to put it in D tier. It's probably high D tier, because it's not dreadful, but it's, yeah. Okay, next up is Eric. Eric used to be quite the meme robot on rules, fan stuff. I never really understood why. Series 4 Eric wasn't bad, but Series 3 Eric, the one thing that destroys this Eric, even though this and the Series 4 version are basically the exact same, the reason why I don't like this one as much is because the flipper. The flipper has a very thin blade, and as a result, you don't know how the hell this thing was meant to flip a robot. And it didn't get a flip on a robot. Instead, it drove itself into the pit. Design-wise, I don't mind it. Like I said, I think the Series 4 version, and the one thing, this is one of those hindsight, the future version wasn't too bad, blah, 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 sort of things. Yeah, I think Eric Eric goes into the... I'm going to put Eric in the... I don't know where to put Eric. Eric is very average. That's the problem. Eric is a very average robot. It wasn't that effective. I'm going to put it in the design section. Like, I genuinely don't know where to put Eric. I might put Eric just above Abaddon, and that's about it. All right. Evil Weevil. I love that name so much. Evil Weevil. Evil Weevil is technically one half of the Panic Attack team, because the Panic Attack team was split up into two. There's Panic Attack and Evil Weevil. Evil Weevil is the other half of it, and you can sort of tell where the inspiration from the previous Panic Attack machine, or where Panic Attack came in, because the big lifting forks, and also the fact that they're Welsh. I quite like the look of Evil Weevil. I love the beetle design of it, which Evil Weevil. I love the forks. It didn't really have much to do, because it was in probably the lamest heat in Robot Wars history, where all the robots didn't work. So Evil Weevil didn't really have much to do to win its heat to get to the semi-finals, by which point it was then trashed by Hypno-Disc. Although it did keep up quite well against Hypno-Disc, to give it credit. It did win the football competition for Robot Wars. Yeah, I think Evil Weevil is a very good-looking robot. I think it's a very decent robot. Much better than the Series 4 version, which sadly just didn't work. I'm going to put it... I'm actually going to put it right by... Actually, no, I'm actually going to put it right at the top of A tier, because I really do like that design. The beetle design looks so good. Excalibur. I'm trying to remember who the successor to Excalibur is, but if I can recall... The successor to Excalibur is a team that has, I think, was it Shredder? It's the robot who succeeds Excalibur is more famous than Excalibur. That's all that I can really remember. And I don't remember who, but Excalibur, I think most people remember more for the fact that it locked horns with Centurion in a quite memorable fight, and then it destroyed Sergeant Bash's flamethrower. So the axe was very good. It was a very good axe, and design wise it's actually not too bad. Pretty plain, admittedly, but I think the sort of red tattoos on the side look really sexy. The axe was very good. In terms of movement, it didn't really move that much. It was one of those robots that just did add control problems, which is a shame, because I think if we saw more of it, it probably could have been much better. I'm going to put it in the great design but ineffective category. You actually know who I'm going to put it in B. I'm going to put it in B. I'm going to put it right by Excalibur. Right by Centurion. Because I think it had untapped potential, but it was screwed over because of circumstances. Next up is Eye of Newt, another pinball-only competitor. Eye of Newt also does appear in several charity events. There's actually some videos online of Eye of Newt fighting suicidal tendencies and all that. So we do know that it did appear outside of this. Eye of Newt, I quite like the design of it being sort of a topsy-turvy sort of robot. I think the design looks okay, honestly. The tabletop sort of design where it can flop up and down like that, like a seesaw. It's just got a big Newt on it, really. It's not the most brilliant looking. In terms of control, it was sort of awkward in control, but I think if it had better control, it would have been decent. And it wasn't dreadful. I think I'm actually going to put it in the effective but poor. No, I'm going to put it in high B tier, because it wasn't that bad. I think I knew it was a decent robot. Facet. Now, Facet has a really lush blue color scheme. I love that chrome sort of blue color scheme, the shininess of it. Its flipper was very powerful when we saw it in combat. It's a shame that it lost in the second round, although it was close to beating Firestorm, which ironically is the next robot along. Facet is just a really beautiful looking robot. It's a shame we never saw this again in Series 4. Why they didn't return with this, I do not know. Although they did return again with GBH2, which was actually a pretty cool robot, but Facet is just one of those one-hit wonders, which you want to see more of, and you never did, which is a real shame because I think Fascist is just such a gorgeous robot. I'm going to put it right into A tier because it was a very good robot. Speaking of Firestorm, it's funny seeing this team appear in the previous wars with Groundhog, which is a very unique but odd looking robot, a robot which was, how do I describe it, too unique for its own good. But Firestorm, this is such a massive improvement. The design, brilliant. The flipper, absolutely wonderful. It had a rear spike, which I don't think it ever actually used other than a demonstration in the pits. It actually has these conveyor belts on the front of it, which I don't think really did anything. It's no wonder they got rid of that. But Firestorm, gorgeous machine. I love the color scheme. I love the yellow with the black, the red at the back with the red like dots. I think that looks so gorgeous. Firestorm, beautiful fucking robot. I think it deserves a very high S tier. Like, very good robot. Flip Flop Fly. Now, this team would return with Tetanus. Flip Flop Fly, on the other hand, it survived, quote unquote, its first round somehow against Wild Willy, which I don't think it should have, because its tires burst quite quickly. In terms of an Axobot, this is a very basic looking Axobot. It's a barrel shaped robot with big wheels and a small red axe. It's a very dull looking robot, all things considered, I think. And I just don't like the look of it. I don't like the look of it. It wasn't very effective, but it wasn't dreadful. So I'm going to put it at least in the D tier. Like, at least it wasn't too dreadful. Flipper. Flipper is meant to be a dolphin. This was a reserve robot, which was brought in, although it wasn't necessarily said on screen, this has been brought in because the previous robot withdrew, because the Parvivian shot was meant to have appeared, but once again it didn't work. So this got brought in, and the TV just claimed, this is just Flipper. They didn't even bother. Flipper is meant to be a dolphin. It seemed quite fast across the arena. I like the big self-righting mechanism it has, which is the big fin that just shoots out. It has an axe, which I don't think it really did anything. I guess it's got a decent design, all things considered, but effectiveness, it was a bit speedy, but it didn't really do all that much. It kind of broke down. Yeah, Flipper, I'm going to put in the great design but ineffective category. Forklift's Revenge. Now, Forklift's Revenge, I quite like the design of. This is, once again, another one of these great designs which just happen to be quite ineffective. Forklift's Revenge, I love the purple colour scheme. Purple looks gorgeous. It's got this conveyor belt look. And when you look at Forklift's Revenge, it actually looks really cool looking. Which is a real shame because it's not that effective. It was picked up by Sakilot and just thrown about, and it fell apart as a result. But it's got a really gorgeous purple colour scheme, and I think it looks great. So I'm going to put it in great design, but ineffective once again. General Carnage. General Carnage won a fight against RoboCow and then got flipped over by Behemoth. General Carnage wasn't that bad. It actually was quite effective. Design-wise, it's very basic, but it's got this army camouflage, and it's got this quite cool-looking claw. I think General Carnage is pretty cool, all things considered. I don't think there's anything much to say other than it's a cool robot. It's a cool robot. Nasher. Nasher was a football competitor. No, it was quite a decent one, all things considered. Got to the final, I believe. But design-wise, Nasher has one thing going for it, and that's the front end. I like the little gnashing teeth at the front. I think that looks great. But aside from that, Nasher has a very ugly looking robot design. And of course, considering the production would always pick robots mostly based on designs, I can see why they didn't pick this one. But saying that, it was quite effective, so I'll give them where credit is due. It was decent and effective. And I'm putting it higher than A-Kill because it actually has the gnashing teeth, which is quite cool. Gravedigger. This was the most successful version of Gravedigger, and it makes you wonder why they didn't just keep this version of Gravedigger for like the future ones, just improve it a little bit. I like that Gravedigger looks like a big coffin. I think that looks great. I think the lush brown color scheme looks fantastic. The flipper was pretty cool. It was able to flip Mortis, able to flip was it Manic Mutant, I believe. Very good looking robot. Very effective robot as well. I think it deserves a high ranking. I think Gravedigger was a very good looking robot. I think it was decent enough. It was undone by Steg-O-Saw-Us, but that's all we can say really. Up next is Griffin. I think I've already been talking for an hour. Jesus Christ. Griffin is basically like Biohazard. It's got this I think it's a 3-bar lifter. However, it's also invertible. Griffin managed to win a battle this time, and I think one of the benefits about Series 3 is it's probably the first series that was a proper Robot Wars series, in the sense that it actually was about robot combat, as opposed to just having a stupid gauntlet and trial at the beginning that no one gave a shit about. This is meant to be Robot Wars, not robot, challenges. And so, making it actually all combat focused, which is what the original Robot Wars in the US was all about. Massive improvement right away. And one of the reasons why it was a massive improvement is because robots were actually able to like compete and do stuff, as opposed to essentially being taken out because they didn't go down the right gauntlet path and got trapped, and as a result got eliminated, even though like shitty robot 10,000 manages to just roll itself away through because it got further and all that, that. And as a result, Griffin was able to shine. It was able to shine in the internet insurrection, mind you, but it was able to shine here. And although it didn't have a long screen time, it's still able to do quite well. I love the way it worked. Very effective robot. Design-wise, I'm not really a fan of Griffin's design, but I don't think it's dreadful either. I think it's good. I'm going to put it in the effective but poor design. It's more or less the same as the Civ 2 version, but again, I just don't really care for his design. Speaking of designs, I love the look of the first Grim Reaper. The first Grim Reaper looks fucking epic. Like, I love the black color scheme with the big skull on the front. I love how it's got like a skeleton hanging off the side. I love how speedy and aggressive it was. I love the free-wheel design. That's really unique, all things considered. It wasn't that effective, mind you, because the wheels were extremely flimsy. They could fall off like just by touching it like that, which is a real shame, because I think Grim Reaper, if it was a bit welded better, I guess you could say, it would have been really, really good. Still, gorgeous design. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely wonderful looking robot. Fantastic. And it's a shame they never really appeared until Series 7 again, because I think I would have loved to have seen more of this robot. I'm actually going to put it like above Crocodile. No, I'm going to put it like just below Crocodiletron. Oh, this way. Below Crocodiletron, but still really effective, really good looking robot. Next up is Grinder, and I don't mean that Grinder. Grinder is it's kind of a generic looking robot, all things considered. It's got a big grinding saw on the front, and that's about it. It was not really shown that much in the middleweight melee, because the middleweight melee was complete pandemonium, and it was more of a house robot rebellion than anything, because the house robots just went in and just destroyed everything in its sight. And Grinder was unfortunately one of those victims. It was attacked by Shunt, who just pushed it across, and I think it flipped it over. So yeah, Grinder we didn't really see much of. A bit of a generic design, and it's going to go in D tier because it's not dreadful, but it's not anything to write home about. I might actually rank it higher than the others because it actually looks okay-ish. Hardvark is interesting because Hardvark is a robot which once again, it's one of those robots that arguably should have won its battle but didn't. It was up against Henry, and it controversially lost. It's in the first round. It was a semi-finalist in Series 2. It's basically the same robot as the Series 2 version, except they've painted it black and they've given it a big saw blade at the front. And I think they've made the armor tough as well. I love the little logos on the side. I love the design. I think it looks great. In terms of effectiveness, it wasn't too bad. It did break down after the 5 minutes of the battle, but still, I don't think it was all doom and gloom. I think Aardvark deserves a decent ranking in the B tier. I think it deserves it. I'm going to put it right over there. Next up is Hammerhead, and Hammerhead is a very weird name for this robot because I don't understand it. Design-wise, it looks almost like a sports car, a sports car with a little big hammer in the middle. I guess it's called Hammerhead because there's like bit in the middle is meant to be a head, and it's got a hammer sticking out. It didn't look too bad, Hammerhead, honestly. Hammerhead wasn't that ineffective. It was actually pretty good. It was just unfortunate that it faced Pussycat in the first round, and as a result kind of got... Pussycat just went for the wheels and just pushed it afterwards and just shunted it into the pit. Which is a shame, because I think Hammerhead, not too bad. Hammerhead is Hammerhead. It is a weird name, all things considered, but I don't think it's dreadful. I think it's on the effectiveness but poor design, because I think the color scheme is also really weird. I don't understand the color scheme. Up next is Hammertron. Hammertron is again a gimmicky robot where the whole gimmick is it's got a big spinning hammer, but that spinning hammer can also lift up and down. Cool, isn't it, guys? Hammertron, however, didn't really work in its first round. It was stuck in like an upwards position, the Hammertron robot. It didn't really do any damage. It got bulldozed, flipped over, and then lost its tracks to dead metal in a really brutal way. Even design-wise, it doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very appealing. It's just black with yellow like borders. It doesn't look very good. The hammer, I guess it's unique, it's gimmicky, but like we've seen with all the other gimmicky robots, it's one of those, it's not that great. I'm just gonna put it like right there. Hard Cheese is the former middleweight champion. It was middleweight champion in Series 2, but in Series 3 it kind of got crushed by Cicalalot and then thrown in the air by Cicalalot's drill. Poor Hard Cheese. I love the fact that Hard Cheese is just this giant piece of cheese. It's great that we actually saw it in combat, even though it basically got demolished, which is a real shame, because I think Hard Cheese would have been pretty fun to see actually working at 100% power. But yeah, Hard Cheese, I love the design, but it kind of got screwed over. I'm going to put it right there. Another really odd design, but a design which I kind of have a soft spot for. Hefty. Hefty is just a silly robot. Like, even when you go on the team website, it's on the Internet Archive. You can tell the team weren't like that serious. Maybe I should have added the joke bot category. I should have added it and added this one. Maybe Crocodiletron, but I digress. Like, Hefty was definitely not there to be that serious. Although saying that, it was pretty speedy. It was still a pretty powerful robot. Went into Exterminate, and Exterminator had to like wedge it against the wall before it flipped it over. So Hefty wasn't dreadful by any stretch of the imagination. So design-wise, it was actually really good. Internally, obviously, externally, it's an odd design. It's a flower power sort of robot, but I like the color scheme. I do quite like the colors. I think the colors are great. Honestly, this is a very mediocre robot, but it's also, I have a soft spot for it, and it looks like I'm gonna need to resize everything. Hang on a second. All right, next up is Henry. Henry is it's not the prettiest looking robot, I'll be honest. I don't really like the look of Henry. It wasn't that ineffective. It was actually able to do stuff. I mean, I guess. Honestly, Henry is. Oh, I just don't know where to put. I'm going to put Henry quite low down. Actually, I'm going to put it in like D tier. It's not F tier necessarily, but it's not appealing to be in any other higher tier. Next up is the first version of Hypno-Disc. Now, Hypno-Disc, Series 3 Hypno-Disc is obviously the weakest of all the Hypno-Discs. The reason why is because basically the way that it used to work is that it had to stop and spin up and then move. And as it was moving, the spinner just slowed down and it was not as effective. Which is why, the battles where it won, it was up against where it destroyed opponents. It was up against robots which were very flimsy, And Hypno-Disc, obviously it's an iconic machine. I don't think the Series 3 Hypno-Disc is as good as later versions of Hypno-Disc. I think the very basic nature of the first version of Hypno-Disc is really what gets me a little bit, which is why I'm not going to put it in S tier. Because whilst I think the design of it is great, like the Hypno-Disc is great, the Series 3 Hypno-Disc is very weak. It's very ineffective. It always astonishes me that in all the merchandise and all the toys and everything like that, they would always use their Series 3 Hypno-Disc. It always astonished me. Like, I'm still going to put it in A tier because it was very effective when it was working. But again, this was definitely a robot which had its fair share of issues. That said, I think I'm going to put it like in the top of A tier. I love Hypno-Disc, but it could be better. Oh, I gotta resize it again. Next up is Inquisitor, another heat finalist from Series 2, which didn't get the main championship role, but instead was regulated to Series 3's side events, i.e. the pinball. This was a very slow robot. It's a very colourful robot. I don't know why Series 3 robots were really colourful. That's always astonished me. Like, design-wise, I guess if you would look at it, it looks like it would be effective, but it wasn't that effective. Like, I don't really care for the colour scheme that much. The lifter, it was able to lift a house robot, but it was very slow. I don't think this was a very good addition. I mean, it was not dreadful, but again, it could have been better. I'm actually going to rank it a little bit higher than that. I think you're a little bit better. I think you're there. Invertebrat. Invertebrat is one of those robots which, it's a very unique robot. I love the bludgeoner look of this version of Invertebrat in particular. I think that looks really cool. I love the little lifters as well. I think that's great. I think the color scheme as well is great. I think it looks almost like it does look like a beetle or an insect of sorts. I love it a lot. I actually kind of prefer the color scheme here than I do the Series 4 version, which I thought was a little bit too plain for me. But still, I think Invertebrat from Series 3 is a very good-looking robot, very unique robot as well, and it didn't use its uniqueness in a flawed sense. It used its uniqueness effectively. In my opinion, it did. I think Invertebrat is a decent A tier. Like, I think it's like a low A tier mind. It's decent though. Still decent. Iron Mask. Iron Mask has one thing going for it, and that is the actual iron face on the front. Aside from that, this robot is a very forgettable robot. It wasn't that effective. It had a very pathetic looking axe on the side of the head, which kind of looks weird when you think about it. And design-wise, it just looks kind of dull. Like, aside from the face, the actual iron mask on the front, it doesn't look that great. But Iron Mask, I'm going to put in D tier, I meant. Because, again, not too dreadful, but, Judge Shred. Now, it's funny when you look at some of these robots, because there's some which look very similar to each other in the sense that there's two robots in Series 3 that had weird, like, lifter claws. This was one of them. Judge Shred was one of them alongside Technophobic, which we'll see later on. But Judge Shred, obviously the later versions of Judge Dredd are more memorable than the first version, which looks really weird, honestly. Like, the first version looks almost like it's a volcano project like you do for school, and it's just been like made up for Robot Wars. It's got axe on the back end as well. I don't really like the first version of Judge Dredd, if I'm perfectly honest. It was effective, I'll give it that. It was effective, but it's very ugly. It's very ugly looking. But at least it was effective, you know. I'll give it that. I do think the later versions are far, far better. Caterkiller. Okay, so similar to like Perspex armor, I am a sucker when it comes to tracked robots. I think tracks look great on robots, and like even weaker robots, they always had decent tracking. And Caterkiller was slow, but at least it looks good. I think the tracks look really cool. I love the little claws on the side. I love the cat face on the front, even if it does look a little bit flat. Obviously with Caterkiller, you know, in hindsight, we do know that it is the cat-free. It will upgrade into cat-free, which is a far, far better machine and so much more powerful in every sense of the word. But, you know, Caterkiller is still a decent looking robot. I mean, I think this is actually much better looking than the Series 4 version. I'm not saying the Series 4 version is ugly, but, you know, again, this is one of those, it's kind of a good design, but its effectiveness was quite null. Next up is Kilohertz. Now, Kilohertz is more famous for driving into the pit and then losing to Chaos 2 in a very explosive fashion, although it did damage Chaos 2, which is shocking when you think about how powerful this machine was, and this robot was the one that damaged it. That said, you got to keep in mind that Kilohertz, prior to Series 3, was in BattleBots. It was in the BattleBots Las Vegas and what's the other one called? Long Beach events. And this is the same Kilohertz. And in that, Kilohertz was a beast of a machine. He even lost its axe at one point and still fought. And so Kilohertz is a massive improvement over the Series 2 version. The Series 2 version was great, but this one's a massive improvement. It had a much more powerful axe. I mean, I've already mentioned it damaged Chaos 2 in the World Championship. It punctured a hole right through the back and left several holes in the front. So, you know, we're already dealing with a very good robot. It's just let down by its performance. Like, it drove into the pit in the main championship, and then it just met Chaos 2 in the World Championship, and it was over, basically. Still, I think it deserves an S tier, because I think Kilohertz is just fantastic. I think a lot of people give it grief and say it's unreliable because, you know, it drove into the pit in the first round here, and it broke down in Series 2. You know, it's a bit like Razor. People just say, oh, it's unreliable because it did this at this one point, and therefore it's unreliable all the time. And reality is, it wasn't. It was a very powerful machine. It was just let down by circumstance. Next up is King B or King Buxton. I think this is a much better design than the King B from Series 2. For one thing, the forks are much more bigger, and they've got this orange design, which looks great. I love the logo on the top of King B this time. It actually reminds me of the logo for System Shock 2. Maybe it's just me, but you look at the logo of King B Buxton on the top of the robot. It looks almost like this System Shock 2 logo. I don't know. But I think it looks so much better than the Series 2 version. Like, the Series 2 version was very plain and looked a little bit too stubby for its own good. This one looks a lot more like, you know, it's got a bit more business to it. And it's only slight changes, and that's the thing. It's only slight changes, but it managed to make it far, far more appealing. I think, you know, again, it's a great robot, great improvement. I think it deserves a high ranking. I'm going to put it in A tier. Speaking of great looking robots, I really love the look of Mace. Mace 2 is just as good as Mace 1. I like the look of Mace 1. Mace 1 is a really, really good looking robot. Mace 2, the only difference is the patterning, the striped pattern. Mace 1 had black and yellow. This is black and red. I don't think it really matters. It still looks great. It was still a very powerful robot, very effective. Gorgeous robot. Is it as good as the S tier ranking robots? I don't think so, but it's still deserving of a high placement. I'm going to put it just there. So after some pretty good-looking machines, we now have Malfunction. Malfunction spelled Malfunk, F-U-N-K, Shun. Yes, this was a football-only competitor. Now, if you were to look at it if you would just close your eyes and pretend or just listen to my description, it was a robot which was round in shape and had a big lifting scoop and a gigantic saw blade on the back. Now, when you hear that, it sounds a little bit cool, doesn't it? Then you look at the robot and you realise it's got a gigantic high ground clearance. It's got a very weird looking saw on the back. It's not like a normal looking saw. And its scoop doesn't even touch the ground and it's slightly bent. I guess the round body is kind of okay-ish. I don't want to say it's too awful. But again, it's D tier, very low D tier. Not as bad as those two, but still low. Next up is Mammoth, and I think this is the first Mammoth we see in the show. Probably the only one that actually looks like a Mammoth. This robot, infamous with its battle with an Arachnid, where neither robot really went towards each other. It was a very slow match. Neither of them actually made contact, and they both got destroyed. I will give it credit. It looks like a mammoth, I guess, in a weird way. It's been quite furry, even though it's basically got a sheep toy on its head, and they just added tusks. And it's a very weird looking robot. It's not a very pretty looking robot. It wasn't very effective, but I mean, it's got its comedic value. It's there with an Arachnid as just a stupid looking robot. Manic Mutant. Now, Manic Mutant is one of those weird robots that people really like. I don't know why this one has its fan base, but it does. I guess design-wise it looks okay. It's got this weird fork thing at the front, which is very flexible and flimsy. It's got a very fluorescent-looking bludgeoner on the back. A fun fact about Manic Mutant is that it appears in Series 4 in the pits. It actually appears in the War of Independence, and if you look closely in the background in the pits, you can actually see it next to Panic Attack. For some reason, it was there. So, presumably, it tried qualifying. And I just remembered, Manic Mutant is the one whose successor is Shredder, I think. Coming to think about it, I think this is Shredder's predecessor. So, yeah, there's a fun fact there. I guess design-wise, it's okay. And, from the brief moment we saw it on its wheels as opposed to on its back, it didn't seem that bad. But again, I don't know. I guess I'll put it in the great design but ineffective category, because I don't think those weapons were going to do anything. I'm going to put it just there. Okay, so now on to, well, technically 2, because I forgot about Daisy, but again, there's not much to talk about Daisy. But Mauler, on the other hand, Mauler was in the First World Championship, and it was about to fight Cerberus. And I can almost tell you right away it would have beaten Cerberus. However, they tested its weapon outside, and Mauler, as it turns out, was considered too dangerous. As a result, Mauler did not appear in the First World Championship, and as a result was disqualified. Which is very interesting. Mauler is obviously a BattleBots robot, a robot that we know from BattleBots, I should say. It also appeared in the 90s. Robot also has got a lot of history, Mauler. It's a great looking design, but because we didn't see it, it has to go in the U tier. And this is discounting all the events that happened in BattleBots and what have you. So yeah, Mauler, great robot. If you're not talking about Robot Wars, that is. Max Damage. Max Damage has the most bizarre name when you look at the robot. The robot is Triceratops with a chainsaw in the front, and it's called Max Damage. It makes no fucking sense, but I will give it this. I do think the design looks great. This is another example where, the design is really creative and really fun, and you've actually put effort into it. But It was a dead robot standing, and it did nothing. It basically did nothing, and that was it. So yeah, your design is decent, but your design is also... I'm not going to put it as high that... Its design is decent, but yeah, no, it's not very effective. Midi-Am Bug. Midi-Am Bug has had a slight change from the previous year. It's much more colourful than the green with the big jaws. It doesn't look as much like a bug this time, I guess you could say. But at the same time, you know, this is the Midi-Am Bug I think most people remember. This is the one that everyone like thinks about. Poor Midi-Am was doing quite well in its battle, and then it drove itself into the pit, which is a shame. But again, Midi-Am's a great robot. It never seemed to be ineffective, but it never seemed to be like too effective. Great design. I think it's with hefty in the sense that it wasn't a dreadful robot, but it wasn't gonna win a fight. Ming. This is the first Ming. It's quite interesting seeing how Ming changes over the years, because this first version of Ming is so different to the Ming 2. And Ming 2 then just gets a claw and the wheel guards removed with Ming 3. And Ming 4, Ming Dynasty, sort of like went back to the old bodywork and just added a drill, which is quite weird to think about. But yeah, Ming 1, its flywheel went flying into the air as Mortis went towards it, lifted up, and the spike hit it and it just went bang into the air. Design wise, Ming has a good color scheme, and that's about the most positive thing I can say, because design wise I don't really like the design. It's kind of too scrappy for my taste. I think the other Mings had a lot more elegance when you look at them, whereas this one just doesn't. You know, especially when they're trying to be like Ming merciless. So, you know, honestly, Ming 1, it's not a good looking robot. Its saw blade wasn't very good. It's not a very effective robot. I'm actually going to put it in F tier. I actually think I should put it in F tier. It's just not as good as you think it is. Missile. I think Missile is actually Blue Max as well. Okay, the Missile is one of 2 robots who have had balloons in the arena. Balloons as decorations. Its eyes are 2 white balloons, and they both popped. One was popped by Anvilophobia. The other one was popped by Sergeant Bash. It's called Missile, and it doesn't look like a missile. It looks more like a bug, and I don't really know what to say about it. It's a very odd design. It wasn't that bad, I guess. You know, it was able to move about. It had a scoop at the front, looked pretty decent. But then again, it got damaged badly. Like, I'm going to put this in D tier. I'm just going to put this D tier. It's a robot which exists. that's the most I can say. It's a robot that exists. Jim Struts. Now, is this Miss Struts? I always get the 2 confused. There's Jim Struts, and then there's Miss Struts. It's a Struts machine. It's the Arnold A. Terminator team, and I you know, it's a very good looking. It's a very well engineered robot. It's a very well engineered robot. In terms of the walker battles, you know, it was the best of the walkers. I quite like the look of it. It's kind of decent. Like, you gotta keep in mind, this is not meant for main competition. I mean, this thing would have been eliminated from the main competition straight away. All it takes is like one robot to bash its legs and it would have fallen over. But still, it was able to do something. It didn't really have any feet or anything like that. I'm gonna put it in the like very low B tier because it was okay. It was okay. Mortis, on the other hand, Mortis. This is sort of the definitive version of Mortis. It's the design that Mortis sticks with from now on, with the lift of the axe and the sort of more bulkier look for it. I love the look of Mortis in Series 3. Series 3 Mortis is fantastic. It's got this greenish brown colour scheme as opposed to the previous Mortis, which was silver, and all black, which was the first wars. This one's got this greenish brown look. This would stay on for the War of Independence for the first round, and it'd go back to its black paint job in Series for. But I think this is a really good looking Mortis. It's quite effective, even if it did have some issues with control. But aside from that, I think Mortis is very sexy. I'm actually going to put it in A tier, S tier, I meant, because it was a robot which definitely fit the bill for what it's meant to do. It's vast improvement over the previous Mortis. Mr. Punch. It's a round shaped robot with whatever the hell that thing was meant to be. That weapon. That weapon wasn't going to hit anything. I don't really have any words for Mr. Punch. The one positive thing I will say is the paint job, the little gnome on the front. I think that looks pretty good. I assume that's meant to be Mr. Punch. That's about it. But even then, yeah, I'm just going to put it in F tier. I'm actually going to put it in F tier. That one paint job does not save it this time. Napalm is basically the same version, the Series 2 version, except now they've removed the chainsaw. And what I mean by it's the same version, the Series 2 version, I mean it is, because they returned with the exact same robot, with the exact same damage, and it's just... It managed to win. It managed to win several fights and then lose against Steg-O-Saw-Us. Like, to give it some credit, it actually managed to do decently. And I do sort of have that soft spot for the original Napalm. Like, the later Napalms I don't really have as much of a positive reaction to, but the original version I did. This was it's a fun robot that managed to just stick around, and it managed to do quite well. I'm going to put it in A tier. I'm going to put it in B tier, because it's not brilliant, but it's also, not god-awful. On the other hand, you have Oblivion. Oblivion didn't qualify for this series. Oblivion 2, despite being a heat finalist in Series 2, Series 3, it was basically put into the pinball. And this is the same Oblivion that we will see in Series 4. It has a different paint job, mind. Very ugly looking. It looks like a brick with, tape around the borders. For the life of me, cannot see any benefit to this robot. It's got an axe which didn't look that powerful, and in fact, I don't think it ever used its axe in any of its fights. It's not very pretty looking. It was unreliable as well because it broke down during its own pinball run. I'm just going to put it in F tier. I'm going to put it in F tier because, once again, it's just an awful robot. Onslaught has returned, and Onslaught has returned with a slightly improved design. It looks like it's the same as before. However, it actually has a moving scoop this time, because the Series 2 version was just a static scoop that just rammed into robots. This actually has a scoop that can lift up and down. And, like with before, I think Onslaught is just a very good looking robot. I think the later versions are much better, but it's still very good. It's basically the same as Series 2's, just it's got an actual scoop this time. Aurak's Revenge. Aurak is one of two robots for that first appeared in Series 2 and has a very weird redesign for Series 3. Aurak in Series 2 was a very weird looking robot as it is. Series 3's Aurak is just completely so radically different that you cannot tell it's the same thing. I feel bad for Aurak though, because design-wise it looks great. I think the design looks really good. However, it was screwed over. Why? Because it was forced to fight Steg-O-Saw-Us in its first battle, and it just got trashed. And it's one of those unfortunate circumstances where, if it was in another fight, it probably would have done decently. But we never got that chance, so I'm going to have to put it into the great design but ineffective category. Where should I put it? Oh, I'll put it just around there. Right. Overkill. Overkill has a chainsaw in the middle of its body. It literally rams into robots at high speed, and supposedly a robot goes on top of it, and chainsaw like grinds and rips it apart. They didn't really get the chance. It basically got bullied and then hit the sidewall and then got eliminated. Overkill effectiveness was 0. Design wise, it's okay, I guess. It looks like one of those rocket ice creams, that you have. I get what you're trying to go for. It just didn't work out. I'm going to put it in D tier. Panic Attack, the reigning champions, they return, and of course, Panic Attack is slowly getting to the Panic Attack that we all know and love. It's got much bigger forks, the forks that would stay on for the rest of its time. Rebels. It's got its own self-right mechanism, and it's ironic that this is the only time the self-right mechanism actually worked. But aside from that, it doesn't have any skirts just yet. And it's got a big spider pattern on the front, which is completely different. It looks far, far more better than the Series 2 version by a long shot. Like Panic Attack, I love the look of Panic Attack. I always have. It's slowly getting to like the really, really good S tier, like high S tier area. But for the time being, it's just going to be on the low end of the S tier, because whilst Panic Attack is fantastic, and I do think it's great, I do think it's not there yet. Thankfully, Series 4 is the next series in the mainline UK Road Wars, and that's a good sign. Next up is Panzer. Panzer is basically a tracked robot. Now, I like tracked robots. And Panzer, I quite like the look of it. I think it wasn't too bad. It was a robot that was, at least did decently. It broke down its feet final and didn't do anything. But at least it was trying to like move about and do some stuff. It's a shame we never saw more Panzer. We only saw it again in Extreme 1 as Panzer Wraith, and it got taken out very quickly. In essence, it was a Rambot. And, I think Panzer was okay. Panzer is okay. I think Panzer goes in B tier. I'm going to put it just there. Pitbull. I love the look of Pitbull. Pitbull is a very, very wonderfully designed robot. It was a very good robot as well. This is one of those really unique semi-finalists that managed to just do really, really well. Pitbull, its main weapon is these jaws at the front. It clamps down on robots, grabs them, and just charges them about. It mostly uses its raw speed and strength to do most of the hard work. It has a great pattern. It almost looks more like a Dalmatian than a Pitbull, but who cares? Honestly, Pitbull, I'd argue, is an S tier ranking. It got screwed over by the arena spikes, which was a shame, because I think Pitbull just looked great, and it was great. It's one of the semi-finalists that you will always remember when you see it, because it was just such a great robot, and its fights were pretty impressive as well. Next up is Plunderstorm, the third of the Plunderbird machines. Why they called this one Plunderstorm, I do not know why. Plunderstorm, I'd argue, is one of the weakest of the designs for Plunderbird. Like, all the other Plunderbirds always had something that looked good about them. Like, the first Plunderbird, I like the colour scheme, and I think the interchangeable weapons are great. The second Plunderbird was a far bigger improvement. Plunderstorm, on the other hand, it just doesn't look very good. I think one of the issues is, because it was forced to take off its weapon, it kind of looks lame. And the fact that it didn't really move much, it doesn't fill you with much hope. They do reuse this bodywork for Series 4, and of course the Series 4 Plunderbird is, in my opinion, the best looking Plunderbird. But at the same time, it's a disappointing Plunderbird. It's not even effective and great design or ineffective. It's just an okayish design. It looks almost overcomplicated. That's the problem. Next up is Prize Fighter. Now, I like Prize Fighter. I like the Series 5 Prize Fighter. But Series 5 / Series 4 Prize Fighter. But Series 3's Prize Fighter, its design is something to certainly admire. high ground clearance, but it also has a flipper. Makes no fucking sense because you can't get underneath a robot if your ground clearance is the size of a fucking sofa, essentially. It has a box on the front. The color scheme is pretty decent. I'll give it that, and the artwork's pretty good. It has a boxing glove on top. Its shape is unusual. It's looking at this thing. What the hell is going on here? Like, what the hell is going on with Prizefire? I'm so glad they changed it like massively for the next few seasons. But honestly, I'm debating whether to put it in F tier. I'm gonna put it in D tier for now, but that's about it. Next up is Prometheus. Prometheus is a US robot. Prometheus is also a robot from the 1996 Robot Wars Championship. Now, the original Prometheus, when you look at it, was so radically different to this one. This one is basically one big wedge. It's petrol powered. However, this is not an effective robot. It was a robot that was a reliability nightmare. That's basically what I was trying to say. I was mixing up my words then. Reliability nightmare. It was a robot that could really only go forwards. It kept breaking down. The armor plating didn't really work in its favor. And yeah, like, this is not a very good looking robot. It's got a laser thing at the front. But that's about it. Like, this robot was so unreliable. It wasn't very good looking. I'm going to put it in F tier. All right, next up is Psycho Killer. Qu'est-ce que c'est? So Psycho Killer, it's a unique looking robot, I guess. The artwork is pretty cool. It almost looks like, how do I put it? It almost looks like, when you're playing like a really old like DOS game from like 1991 or something like that. And, it almost looks like the computer hacker virus villain, that has just been imprinted on here. It looks pretty cool. It has a good looking axe, even though the axe didn't really do much. The axe is actually this like rubber glove attached to it. It almost looks like someone's stabbing you. That's pretty cool. It works with the Psycho Killer name. I love the name as well. Shape-wise, it's a decent box wedge shape. Unfortunately, it didn't really do too well. It lost to Dreadnought, but design-wise, I think it was a decent-looking robot, and it's a shame it didn't do too well, because I think it could have been decent. I'm going to put it there. Up next is Purple Predator. Now, Purple Predator, they would return in Robot Wars with a very infamous competitor called Granny's Revenge. And Purple Predator is this... It's like Prizefire in a way, where it has a gigantic ground clearance, yet it also has a flipper, meaning that it's not going to flip at a single robot because the robot's going to be too underneath it. Too low for it. Oh dear. Pardon. It's a fur-covered robot. It's got a big doll on the top of it. I think it's like an action man dressed with sparkly stuff. I don't think this was meant to be taken seriously. To be fair, I'm going to say that right now. I don't think Purple Predator was meant to be taken seriously. I am starting to regret not putting a joke bot category on. I really am. But yeah, Purple Predator, I think design-wise it's just hilarious. Unlike Prizefire, who was actually meant to be more serious competitor, this one's obviously less so. But it's still, effectiveness. It was able to survive its match. It didn't catch fire. It's the only robot covered in fur to never catch fire, which is astonishing. It's astonishing. So, up next is Pussycat. I love Pussycat. Pussycat is my number one favourite robot of all time. However, this is a Series 3 Pussycat. The Pussycat that disc shattered while it was in combat. Pussycat here also has a slightly different design to later versions, because later versions would have a blue coat and or black in Extreme 2, and then silver in Series 7. This one is a Perspex armor, and it looks gorgeous. I think that looks fantastic. Honestly, everything about this Pussycat is just amazing. Like, everything about it is just awesome. The only thing that doesn't put it number one is because of the disc. I don't like the disc. I don't like this rounded disc. The problem is I'm more used to the disc from like later versions, which is the like 4-tuft blade or the 2-tuft blade. But still, good looking robot. Next up is Razorblade. Razorblade, we're around the R's, so that means we're getting closer to the end. Yay. Razorblade is... I love the look of Razorblade. I've always found the design of Razorblade to be absolutely gorgeous. And this version of Razorblade has a chainsaw as opposed to a spike, which the Series 4 version has. I love the look of Razorblade. I think the artwork is just beautiful. I don't understand it at all. It's like this weird, like, scaly dragon pattern, but then it also has like gears on the side, and then it has like a treehouse on the back. It makes no fucking sense, but it's great. I love it. Design wise and effectiveness, it wasn't too bad. It was sort of in terms of effectiveness, it sort of just lost its fights because it just wasn't as aggressive enough, and it almost seemed too hesitant in battle, which is a real shame because I think Razorblade is a very good robot. It has an untapped potential, and I'm actually going to put it like actually the bottom of A tier because I think it's really, really good. Like, it just had that untapped potential that it just never really got itself pushing itself forward as much. Now, next up is a bit of a special robot, and this robot, I'm not going to go into too much detail why it's special, but I really like this robot. There is a bit of a special connection I have with this robot, and I'm not going to go into too much details or bog you down with any of that. But Rasus is a robot which appeared in the final heat of Robot Wars Series 3. It was in Heat P, and it's shaped like a rat. Already a fantastic looking design. But it's also a super incredibly impressive robot, despite it only fighting 2 battles. It fought one battle where it was against S.M.I.D.S.Y, and despite it being a barrel-shaped robot, it actually got underneath S.M.I.D.S.Y and just charged it across the arena. It was so aggressive and so speedy. Like, Rasus was a really good robot. Unfortunately, in that same fight, it got damaged. And then in the second round, it basically, because of the damage, it couldn't really move much. And it got eliminated because Dreadnought just didn't have to do much, but just tap it once and it was dead. But honestly, like, if this robot had better armor, maybe some better control, this would have been really good. Like, I actually could see this robot being a semi-finalist in most of these heats. Like, look, if it was in Heat L, for example, it would have been semi-finalist. Like, this, it's a shame that it was sort of, like, screwed over by its own control, by its own circumstances, because this would have been a fantastic robot. Obviously, okay, so for those who don't know, when we work... I work on the Robot Wars wiki, and I remember when I was hosting one of the tournaments, it was the First World Championship, and I remember Ratus was in it, and I thought, well, because we were using RNG to get random numbers, I thought this robot was not going to last long. And one of the funny things about it is, it, like, by some golden gift from God, some grace, somehow, it managed to just win every fight. And then it met Chaos 2, and it just didn't win that one. But the RNG was just on its side during that, and that actually made me so happy. Like, it was one of those things that made me so happy that it just happened. I don't know why I'm telling you that, because most of you probably don't care, but I just remembered that, and I thought, wow. And even then, like, this robot is a fantastic robot. I think this is truly one of those underrated gems, and I love it. I love it a lot. It's fantastic. Had it been slightly better in the armor department and control wise, it would have been beautiful. Speaking of beautiful, Razor has basically, it's almost like 100% pure Razor, almost, because it still uses very basic wheels. It doesn't have the what's it called, gyroscopic back end, where the wheels like can turn and the robot will just turn like sideways, more or less, always facing its opponent, in other words. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Razor is one of the most beautiful fucking robots ever made. In terms of effectiveness, now, a lot of people harp on Razor saying it's unreliable during its earlier days. It only got reliable during Series 5, blah, blah, blah. I want you to rewatch Robot Wars right away. Like, the only real time it had reliability issues was, well, in Series 2, because it broke down. And in Series 3, well, it celebrated too... Well, I say it celebrated too early. It lifted itself too early and got stuck on the floor. You then watch the First World Championship, the International Championship, the pinball. It just dominated it all without issue. Oh, but what Series 4? Well, in Series 4, it got sliced apart. I mean, do you say that Hypno-Disc when it destroyed VMAX? Do you think VMAX was unreliable because it got destroyed? No. You know, I think people just want an excuse to dislike Razor half the time, because Razor is just beautiful. Razor is fantastic. Razor is definitely S tier. But it's not number one because, like I said, it's not pure Razor just yet. Next up is Red Dragon. Now, Red Dragon is a Welsh robot. Now, the funny thing about Red Dragon is that it very recently went on eBay and it was being charged with, like, what was it, like £9,000 to buy this robot from Robot Wars. And it was one of those things that came out of the blue. Like, what the fuck? You know, Red Dragon just randomly appeared. I mean, mind you, Crocodiletron also randomly appeared online one day. But Red Dragon, I quite like the fact that it is designed like a Red Dragon, but that's about it. Everything else, it wasn't very good. It was trashed by Sir Kill-A-Lot, and all things considered, quite lame. Next up is Ripper's Revenge. Ripper's Revenge is a successor of Ripper. Much more bigger this time. It's a box and it sucks. It's going in F tier. Fuck this design. Just no. Just no. Actually, you know what? Binky was worse than Ripper's Revenge. But still, just no. Then we have RoboCow. RoboCow is... RoboCow didn't really last very long. It's a shame about RoboCow because it was meant to have had this really fun-looking head on top of it. It's like, it was basically like a RoboCop parody, but it was a cow, and it looked really amazing. And unfortunately, because of weight reasons, they had to remove it, which sucks, because I think if they had that on, this would have been on the great design but ineffective category. Instead, it's going to have to go in D tier because it's aside from the patterning and obviously what it could have been, it just doesn't reach it. Sorry, RoboCow. I do kind of like you, but no. Oh dear. Robogeddon. Robogeddon's a very famous robot. Not famous because it was like one of the greatest robots that ever lived. Like, this robot like demolished the competition and lost to Chaos in the grand final or something like that. It's famous because it got destroyed by Hypno-Disc. It was the first victim of Hypno-Disc. And I think most people remember Robogeddon for that and less so for what it was. Design-wise, it looks like a Brussels sprout with a flipper. It has like eyes. Mind you, when Hypno-Disc tore off the armor, you could actually see that it had like teeth across the flipper, which actually looked pretty cool. But... I mean, I'll give it this. The design is quite goofy and quite funny. And it's more famous because it got destroyed. It wouldn't have won a single battle. Like, even if it fought in any of the other fights, I don't think it would have won. Because, I mean, just look at it. This flipper was not going to get underneath a single thing. What the hell? It's egg-shaped, and you got a flipper which is round and doesn't even like get underneath anything. Its design is so... I'm reluctantly putting it in the great design category, but in effect, just because it is a comedic-looking robot. I don't think it was meant to be taken seriously. I'm just saying that right now. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna drop it down to D. It's gonna be with RoboCow. It's a robot which, yeah, it's not. Up next is RoboPig, and this is another robot-based animal-based robot. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I love the look of RoboPig, and RoboPig wasn't even that bad either. That's the surprising thing about it. Like, I'm chuckling now. RoboPig was surprisingly decent for what was a very silly looking robot. It was. I bet you if Napalm didn't if it didn't drive up Napalm, it probably would have won the Napalm fight just because it was more aggressive, quote unquote aggressive. Honestly, RoboPig's design is so goofy, so silly, so wonderful looking, and its effectiveness wasn't dreadful by any stretch of the imagination. Its control was a little bit off. Honestly, RoboPig goes into like B tier. It's one of those robots which, you know, it wasn't that bad. I'm actually going to put it right next to Napalm. A robot that is bad, on the other hand, is Rox, which has the worst pinball score ever. The pinball, you know, a skill of driving and all that, this only got like 35, I think, which is the lowest ever. It wasn't very effective. It's got a hideous like color scheme. Like, it looks almost like the Sixth Doctor's jacket, just as a robot. That's what this looks like. Yeah, Rox is going in F tier. Rox is going to F tier. I don't think it's as bad as some of these other ones, but it's still bad enough. Another robot called Scarab. Scarab, in this case, looks pretty cool. Honestly, the claws of Scarab and the design looks really like... I whenever I look at Scarab, I think to myself, this is a robot with untapped potential. A robot which would have had so much to do if it was pretty good. And it's a shame that we never really saw much of it, because it kind of got pushed about straight away and then like went on the spikes and just killed. Which is a shame, because I think Scarab actually would have been pretty cool. Like, I think design-wise it looks great. I think design-wise it was great. Effectiveness, less so. That's all I've got to say. Poor Scarab. I think it would have been a pretty cool robot. It's like with Crusher. It's one of those robots which untapped potential. Shumi returns, and Shumi actually looks more like a Formula 1 car this time and less that weird black brick in the arena. Shumi was actually pretty good. Like, Shumi was actually really good in its only fight. Like, this is an example of a robot where, yeah, it only fought one fight, but that one fight was enough to show everyone that, yep, this robot actually could have done a whole lot of stuff. It could have, you know, been really decent. Like, the lifting forks were pretty good at flipping up Steel Avenger, and overall the robot was pretty speedy and aggressive. Unfortunately, driving-wise, it drove itself into the pit, which killed off its chances. Which is a shame, because I think this is a massive improvement over the previous Shumi. I'm going to put it in B tier. It's definitely a good robot. It's a good enough robot for that category. Up next is Scutter's Revenge. This first is the Scutterbots, and in my opinion, the most beautiful looking. I love the look of Scutter's Revenge. Scutter's Revenge is a gorgeous, gorgeous robot. Unfortunately, Scutter's Revenge has an issue, and that issue is it wasn't the most reliable. Scutter's Revenge broke down in its heat final and lost to Pussycat, but Pussycat broke the blade, so Scutter's Revenge automatically went on to the same final, and then it broke down there as well. It was pretty good in its first fight because it was up against a robot that just couldn't work, i.e. Zeus. And I don't really remember what happened in its second round, but it won that one. I only really remember the Pussycat and Zeus fight. Who did it fight in the second round? I'm trying to remember. See, Cassius was against Pussycat. Scutter's Revenge, Pussycat, Cassius, Hammerhead. I don't remember. I genuinely don't remember. But nonetheless, design-wise, this is gorgeous. I think the colour scheme is fantastic. The robot looks great. It's just reliability is just not that great. It was quite slow. Massive shame, because I think Skirt's Revenge would have been a fantastic robot had it been a bit more reliable. And, you know, I actually think it's one of the most beautiful looking of the Scutterbots, if that makes sense. Like, the Scutterbots always seem to just degrade over the time. Like, it went from really good looking, but not that effective, to quite effective and still pretty good looking, to pretty good looking, but once again, not really effective, to not really good looking, not really effective, not really good looking, not really effective, not really good looking, not really effective, i.e. Spawn Again, which sucked. Speaking of sucking, Sergeant Meekle, which probably has the well, not really the greatest honor in the world, but the honor of having an axe which was basically made out of paper or cardboard or whatever it was. It was the axe. There was no way that was made out of metal. There was no way that was made out of plastic, for example. That was one of the worst axes of all time. The robot itself wasn't very good looking. It sucks. This is an F tier. This is F tier, and honestly, I don't know whether to choose Binky or this one as like the worst robot, because they was awful. Up next is Shark Attack. Shark Attack is a shark-shaped robot. It got flipped over by Behemoth quite quickly and didn't really do much. That said, Shark Attack looks decent. It looked alright. Not much to write home about. It's going to go quite low on the great design list. Speaking of great designs, which are going to go quite low, we got Shell Shark. Shell Shark. It's weird because there's two robots in Robots that are called Shell Shark, and both of them looked very similar to each other. They were both turtle-shaped robots with an axe that went over its entire body. It's weird how that happened twice. I think this is really a cute looking robot. It's got a little axe. It actually wasn't too bad either. I love the fact that the head, the legs all like come in and out. It's almost like a toy, you know, a children's toy that goes across the floor and like, it just pops in and out like that. It's got a cute little snail on the top of it. Design wise, this is great. Effectiveness, it wasn't too dreadful, but it wasn't great. It wasn't too great either, so I'm just gonna put it right there. No, that's too nice. Let's put it there. Up next is the another Forget Me Bots, and this is Shrapnel. Shrapnel was quickly beaten off by careful words there. Quickly beaten by the Big Cheese. It was basically lifted over. The Big Cheese actually penetrated through the bottom armor and destroyed it. It has a rotary blade at the front, but it was basically a box-shaped robot, and it's so generic it actually hurts. It's so generic it hurts. Sir Chromalot, their first ever Sir Chromalot. Sir Chromalot, this team isn't really there to be serious at all. They're there to be showmen. I kind of like Sir Chromalot. I think this is definitely one of the weaker versions of Sir Chromalot. I think the later versions of Full Armor are better, but that's not to say that it's not dreadful. It was effective. Its design is it's basic, but it's also just it's one of those iconic looking robots that you know what it is, you know who they are. You can't just say, oh well, it's not a very good design, it's just a wheel hub. But we know who this robot is. We know exactly what it's capable of. I'm gonna put it all the way in the B tier. I'm gonna put it there. All right, up next is Six Pack. Six Pack is a pinball-only robot. This is another one of those robots which people really love, and obviously we didn't get a lot of because it only appeared in the pinball. However, from what we saw, it looked like a really good-looking robot. It looked pretty decent, all things considered. It's a shame we never saw it in the main competition, because I think it would have been pretty decent. I think it really would have been decent. Like, the design is great. The design is fantastic. It almost looks like a long version of Behemoth with like a more triangular scoop. It looked like a beast of a machine. It was really good looking. I just feel like in terms of effectiveness, it was pretty decent. It wasn't greatest, but it was decent enough. It seemed speed. It seemed to be able to like traverse over the environment pretty well. I'm gonna put it in like A tier because I think this was a robot which had untapped potential, and that's the thing. When you have a robot that has untapped potential, you want to see more of it. It's like Crusader, but at least with Crusader we saw it. S.M.I.D.S.Y. Now, S.M.I.D.S.Y. in Series 3, this was its first ever appearance, and it wasn't the best debut, all things considered. I love the look of S.M.I.D.S.Y. I've always loved the look of S.M.I.D.S.Y. I think the orange and black looks so well. I love the logo on the back. It looks so industrial. And, of course, you know, them being a biker team, it looks like a biker's jacket just plastered onto a robot. It looks so great. And the jaws, the face, everything, it looks great. A shame that it didn't really do very well. Obviously, in hindsight, we know that S.M.I.D.S.Y. will do well. And this version of S.M.I.D.S.Y. in particular does reappear in Series 4. So we do know that it will do very well there. But Series 3 S.M.I.D.S.Y. not so much. Great design, but ineffective. But I'm going to put it right at the top because we know it has great potential. Next up is Sonic. Sonic actually gave Chaos 2 a bit of a scare, or at least George Francis claims that he had a bit of a scare when he faced Sonic, because Sonic was a lot more tougher than the other opponents, because he was a bit more speedier. Sonic was also helped out by Chaos 2 team, so before they defeated them, they actually helped them out. I really like the look of Sonic. Sonic is a really cool looking robot. I do prefer it with the Detour fur on it, because the Detour fur gives it those eyebrows and the back end being furred up. That looks great. I think obviously another thing about Sonic is that it's actually just a recycled version of Barry. We saw Barry in Series 1. This is basically Barry that has been just torn apart and remade into this. You can even see the wheels are the exact same. It's got a lot of character to it. It's speedy. It's pretty aggressive. Obviously, it didn't do too much, but it was still decent enough that I think I'm going to put it in the B tier. It's an average but good robot. And that's the most I can say about it. Spectre. Spectre was a football competitor, and it has little football shoes. I mean, I'll give this. It has a bit of character to it. It has, you know, that like nose thing. I think that was meant to have been a chainsaw, but obviously it got changed into whatever that is. Hook, I assume. It's got this face on the front. Like Spectre, I'll give it this. It has a lot of character. I think the design is quite humorous to look at. But again, it wasn't that effective. Great looking design though. Great looking design. Now that's like I said. I said this at the beginning. Like a lot of these Series 3 robots have really good designs. They just weren't very effective at all. I'm going to put it there. Up next is another one of these great designs, but really ineffective, and this is Spike. Not the most exciting name in the world. Spike. Spike has a spike. Spike, I love the robot look. It almost looks like a miniature house robot. Like this is what like someone who has no idea how to make robots would make their house robot look like. It looks like, you know, the Chinese knockoff of house robots almost. I love it though. I really love it. I think the design is great though. I think the design, the face and all that. I love the little arms, the plastic. It looks almost like a toy, almost a big toy that you play with. Effectiveness though, it wasn't very effective. Again, great design, but not very effective. I told you there'd be a lot. I told you. Actually, I think I prefer it over that. Next up is Stealth. Stealth is a really sexy looking robot. Like, once again, beautiful robot. I don't think it ever used its flipper though. Stealth quite infamously had its flipper torn out by Hypno-Disc, because it had its flipper open and then Hypno-Disc came in and just tore the flipper off, or tore like the middle like piston bracket, whatever it's called, off, and like just neutered it completely, and then it went on the arena spike and like tore off the back back disc. Again, Stealth might not have been that effective. but at least it was sexy looking. At least it's a very sexy looking robot. Again, it sort of had untapped potential as well. That's another thing. Steg-O-Saw-Us. Now, the interesting thing about Steg-O-Saw-Us is that it actually had what was it? It actually was a stock robot. It was a reserve that wasn't actually meant to have appeared in Robot Wars, and instead it was brought in because for whatever reason another robot withdrew, and I think it was T-Rex that withdrew. I think that was the robot that withdrew. So they brought in another dinosaur related robot, and this is the most successful of the Stegosaurus robots. Even though Steg 2 is often considered the best one because it had the big flipper and all that, this was the most successful, and this was a very powerful robot. And I love the look of it. The look of it still has that Stegosaurus look. It's got like a little like cute little face on the front of it. If you look at it, it's got a nose and like a little mouth. The Stegosaurus like spines on the back of it looks great. The tail actually having the Stegosaurus spikes. Stegosaurus is great. And this is a great robot, great design, very good robot. And of course, the first of the Stegosaurus machines. I'm going to put it in S tier. It's an S tier robot for me. I'm actually going to put it like at the lowest point though, because it's not as good looking as the others, but it's still such a great robot. Stegosaurus rules. Up next is Sting. Sting 2, to be precise, because Sting 1 was in Series 2. Sting 1, I never really cared that much for the design, but it was okay. Sting 2 looks a bit more industrial, a little bit more skeletal, a little bit more rusty looking. I actually quite like the design of Sting 2. The more I've looked at it, the more I've realised, you know what, the design of Sting 2 actually isn't that bad. I actually think it looks really sexy, the industrial, more scrappy, more rough look of it. The tail wasn't very useful. I mean, again, this mace-like tail which just never really worked. So yeah, Sting 2, I like the design, but it's not, the best. Stinger. Stinger is awesome. I love Stinger to pieces. Series 3 Stinger has the the pizza cutter. Paper cutter. What the fuck am I talking about? The pizza cutter. Instead of the mace. So we all know that Stinger has a mace usually. It swings back and forth, slamming back and down. But Stinger in Series 3 had a pizza cutter, which sort of hindered its movements a bit. So it'd like drive about, and because it's like it sort of like stuck itself in the ground a bit too much, or it dictated its own movements as a result, which was unfortunate for Stinger. But nonetheless, Stinger, like, this is the first appearance of Stinger. Stinger's always had a great design. Stinger's fantastic. Pizza Cutter, though, I don't think is that great. This is going to be right next to, like, Hypno-Disc. It's a case of it's almost at its greatness, but there's little problems that just miss out, unfortunately. Next up is FUD. FUD is... No, this is not FUD. Stomp. This is Stomp. Thinking of the Series 2 robot. Stomp. Stomp was a walk robot. I think it was a quite good looking design for Stomp. I won't lie, I think Stomp has a really cool and unique looking robot design. Effectiveness, however, it could not move. It literally stopped on the spot and couldn't move. It was trying its best, but it just couldn't do it. So yeah, Stomp, you're a great design, I'd argue, but you're not that effective. I'm gonna have to decrease even more, aren't I? Boy, this is actually getting harder to see because I've had to like make it even smaller because there's just so many fucking robots. It makes me dread for Series 4 and 7 because those two have quite a lot of robots. Series 7 has almost the amount of Series 3, but Suicidal Tendencies is next. Great design, already great design, very effective robot. Obviously, it's not my favorite version of Suicidal Tendencies. I think the later versions are far more better, but I think this is still a good looking robot. I never really understood the pterodactyl look on the back. I know Suicidal Tendencies is a reference to a band or a song or something like that. So it might be an album cover they've just placed on the top. I don't know. Still, Suicidal Tendencies, it's a great start to what is going to be a great series of machines. Next up is something. Something, not something, something. Something. This is the first version of something, and it died in like less than a second by charging forward and breaking itself. I do have a soft spot for something. Obviously, it's not effective. It's not very good in any sense of the word. Design-wise, I actually don't hate the design. I quite like the scrappy look of it. It's just very like rough around the corners, and that's the whole point. It's meant to be rough. It's meant to be like grisly to look at. Something, I like you. I do. I like you a lot. Next up, and this is, who is this? Oh, this is T2. Oh, we're on the T's now. T2, yes, T2. I absolutely love T2's design. T2's design is great. I actually love T2 in general. Like, Heat F of Series 3 is one of my favorite Road Wars episodes. Every battle on that was just so fun in their own right. Even like the weaker ones were always like enjoyable in some aspect. And T2 was definitely one of the highlights. I love the like train design of it, the steam train look of it. I believe Philip Forrester like called it like Thomas the Tank Engine with a mohawk. It sort of is. We never really saw its axe, which was meant to be like coming into play. It was always just ramming opponents. It did get controversially eliminated against Dark Destroyer, which I don't agree with. I think this should have won that fight, but it's still a great fight and it's still a great robot. I love T2. T2 was great. It was a fun robot to be in the arena with, see in the arena, I should say. Yeah, I'm actually going to put it in A tier. T2, you're fantastic. Next up is Technolease. Now, it's funny because I've talked about its successor, Slicer, and said how Slicer was like such an amazing robot, one of the best Dutch robots ever. Well, this was its predecessor. Technolease it's a weird robot, considering who its successor is and how brilliant that robot is. Because this is just a box. This is just a very shiny box with a little saw blade. I don't think it ever won a fight. I think it drew one fight and lost the other two, and because it got flipped over by Behemoth and it got crushed by Razor. And the Razor fight is awesome. That fight against Razor is great. Like, Razor used all of its tactics. It used its back claw, it used its like wheel like charge, which it never did in any other battle. Like, it really was a demonstration for it. Technolease is it's one of those unfortunate robots where the successor, fantastic. The original, less so. It's shiny though. I like the shininess to it. I'll give it that. Next up is Technophobic. Technophobic we saw in Series 2, and this is Technophobic 2, technically Technophobic. Technophobic 2 has a really weird looking design. I don't know what to make of its design. The design is odd, like way too odd for my own taste. It's a fluorescent color, which is kind of cool, and I think the like weaponry is great, but it's really weird. Now, despite its odd design, it did make up for it with effectiveness. It was a very effective robot. It eventually lost to Pitbull because Pitbull was just so aggressive and so much more powerful, but Technolease was still pretty decent. I think this is definitely an example of where it was really effective, but the design just isn't that great. You know, it's just like Judge Shred. In fact, both like Judge Shred, it has like these claw lifters, which is funny to think about. Next up is another BattleBots US robot that end up in Robots. It's Tetnomushi. Tetamushi. That's how you pronounce it. I screwed that up. Tetamushi, I'm sure most people know, is the giant ladybird that smothers its opponents. It's a very good robot. Like, despite it being a children's sandpit with like a metal frame at the back, it was a very good robot. Tetamushi, not much to say other than it was just really, really good. Great design as well. Deserving middleweight champion, although it was joint champion with Akil. And technically speaking, it was actually a lightweight, not a middleweight, which actually makes this achievement even better. And it won the War of Independence against Akil as well. Yeah, just an overall really good robot. Not much to say. It's a shame we never saw Tetamishi again in Road Wars, because I think it would have been a great robot to have. I'm going to put it there. Next up is Terminal Ferocity. Terminal Ferocity is a very interesting robot because it was a robot that, despite never appearing again in Road Wars after losing its first round battle against Facet, it continued to fight in several live events and even fought like in the more modern live events with roaming robots and Road Wars and all that. All the way in the like mid 2000s and what have you, mid 2000 early 2010s or what have you. Like, it's weird how that robot, like, I mean, mind you, Shumi was the same, but it's weird how that robot managed to like stay the test of time. It's a flipper nowadays, and it's not a chainsaw robot, but it exists, and they even tried applying for Series 8, which is quite interesting. Design wise, it's very unique. Effectiveness, I don't think it was going to win a fight. Let's be honest now, it wasn't going to win a fight. It lost its Series 4 qualifier against Razorblade, who flipped it over. And Razorblade, who may not have been the most reliable robot in the world, but still could put up a fight, he was able to flip it over. Then, you know that your robot isn't that effective. So yeah, great design, ineffective, same as usual. Jesus Christ, look at how many there are. I do not know where to put you. I'm going to put you there. Next up. Now, next up is two of the same robots. Interesting thing about Terra Australis is that the robot that we're staring at the moment, this invertible box-shaped robot, the green robot with the eyes and the antennae, this thing was an unreliable mess. It didn't work. It just didn't work. To give it some credit, it had like quite a goofy design, which is why I'm not going to put it in F tier necessarily. Actually, no, I'm going to put it in F tier because I criticize Ming and Mr. Punch and Alien despite having like one too many good designs. Yeah, this robot just didn't work. This actually might be, objectively speaking, the worst robot that ever appeared in Road Wars because it just didn't work. It just never worked in multiple appearances. So yeah, do I hate it more than Binky? I don't hate it as much as Binky. Binky I fucking despise, but Terra Australis, at least I can enjoy in a weird way. But Terra Australis had a bit of help, and its help came in the form of Detour. Detour, our Team Nemesis, offered Nemesis over. So what we have is Nemesis again. And Nemesis with a different paint job. It's yellow now and silver, and it's got the Australian flag on it. Terra Australis as Nemesis was a far better machine. It actually could do stuff. I don't think it won a battle. I think it still got defeated. I think it got flipped over by Proposaurus Rex. But still, great to see them do a little bit more decently now. Still, not enough though. Let me put you there. Next up is Terrapin. Terrapin, Jesus Christ. This robot has a really unique design. I love the design a lot. It was surprisingly effective. Like, despite its round shape, Terrapin was known for being able to push robots really well. Like, you'd think a robot that is round in shape wouldn't be able to push other robots very well, but Terrapin could, and it was really good at it. It lost, I believe, to a judge's decision in the second round. I'm trying to remember who it fought. I don't know who it fought. I think it was Invertebrate it fought. And yeah, overall, what a beautiful looking robot. Very effective as well. It's a fan favorite to a lot of people for a very good reason. Do I think it's as good as A tier's rankings? No, I'm going to put it in B tier, but it's still a very high B tier, and I'm going to put it just there. Of course, you're going to do that, aren't you? Next up is the Big Cheese. The Big Cheese, what a great looking robot. The Big Cheese looks fantastic. It looks like a piece of cheese. Obviously, we know about Wheelie Big Cheese, who, is more famous than the Big Cheese, but I think the Big Cheese still deserves a lot of credit. It's a very gorgeous looking robot. I think the lifter is very effective. It's a very effective robot. It looks like a Big Cheese. I love the big cat design on the front. Yeah, not much to say. I mean, obviously, Wheelie Big Cheese is far more famous, but the Big Cheese is still a fantastic robot. Fantastic design, fantastic in all those different aspects. And I'm going to lose my temper with this thing. Jesus Christ. All right. Next up is the General. The General is a robot that we see later on in Series 8. The General was going to appear in Series 4, but of course failed to qualify. I really like the look of the General. The General looks great. It was quite an effective robot as well. I was able to do well in its football competition. Shame it never made it to the main competition, because I think it would have been quite a cool robot to see. Still, great to see the General, and it was great to see them return in Series 8. It's one of those unsung heroes in a weird way. I'm going to put it in B tier. I'm going to put it just above Dominator, because I think it's better than Dominator. Which is weird to say, given what Dominator 2 is. Next up is Thermador. Because unlike Thermador, this is spelled with an A. Thermador, this doesn't have the flipper, but it looks more like a lobster. Design-wise, looks great. Effectiveness-wise, it was quite effective. It was used its claws and its pushing power to do all of its business. It was invertible. It was very good. The same old stuff I've said a million times. Very good. Obviously, we know that Thermador 2 is a far more better machine. It's a far more effective machine. But we haven't got to Thermador 2 just yet. That's later on. Still, what a great start. And I'm going to put you right over... I'm actually going to put you right here. Near the top. Jesus Christ. Next up is the Steel Avenger. The Steel Avenger is its first appearance. I actually don't like this version of the Steel Avenger as much as the later versions, which is weird because this is actually the only version which actually looks like a Steel Avenger Knight sort of thing, with its shiny armor as opposed to the Perspex armor. But I've said it before, I'm a sucker for Perspex armor, and I think that looks so much better on the Steel Avenger. That said, Steel Avenger was pretty effective. It was pretty aggressive in the arena. I mean, it did kind of get dominated in both of its fights. It got dominated by Shumi 2, who drove into the pit, and then it got dominated by Detour, who just flipped it over, and then it caught fire. But still, I think Steel Avenger is still a great robot, still a decent robot. It's not my favourite version of the machine. I think this is probably one of my least favourite. It's actually my least favourite. But, again, still deserves to be, given a decent fighting chance. Next up is the Witch. The Witch is a robot which is shaped like a witch's hat. We know Wizard was shaped like Wizard's hat. The Witch is the successor, which has a really great design. That's about all I can say. I love the team dressed up as witches and wizards and what have you. But the design is the only good thing about it. But its design is also its hindrance, because it had this it basically had like a paper mache hat. Because the hat rattled, it rattled and knocked out the removable link, or knocked out the switch that turned itself off. Which, as a result, meant that the Witch killed itself via its own design. So even though the design is great, its design was also its hindrance. Still a great robot, absolutely wonderful. I love it. Great design, ineffective, simple as that. And I'm actually going to rank it quite highly, because I think it deserves... Actually, I'm going to rank it just there. I think it deserves a high ranking. Next up is Thing 2. Thing 2, the predecessor to Wild Thing. It basically is Wild Thing, just without a lifter or a spinner or anything like that. And what a great first step this is. Technically Demon was the first step, but this is the second step. Fast, speedy, aggressive. What a wonderful robot. What a wonderful combination. The color scheme is fantastic. I love the demon head on the front. I think it looks great. Everything about Thing 2 is fantastic. It didn't have a self-right mechanism, which, yes, does hinder it in the end and does ultimately cost it its championship bout, but nonetheless, I think it deserves a very good S rank because I think it's just such a gorgeous machine. I actually think it deserves that. Next up is Toe Cutter. Now, Toe Cutter was originally called Blade Runner, and you actually see this in the audition tape of Toe Cutter's audition, or Blade Runner's audition. Both names would have worked well, because one looks like it's going to cut your toes off, the other, well, literally has a running blade. Both movie titles, and both referencing two fantastic movies, that being Blade Runner and, of course, Mad Max. Absolutely wonderful movies, truly amazing. Blade Runner in particular, I fucking love that film. And not Blade Runner, Toe Cutter, as it was named in the actual series, unique design. That's the best I can say. It's had a unique design. It wasn't terribly ineffective. It was actually able to do stuff, but at the same time, its weapon was so high it wasn't going to affect anyone. So it wasn't that effective in that sense. Again, this is a very gimmicky robot, and as a result of it being very gimmicky, it's hindered itself more than anything. That said, I don't think it's that bad. I'm going to put it in B tier, but it's going to be a low B tier because it's a great design. Might be a little bit boring to some, but at the same time, it had a very cool weapon. Next up is Trident. Trident, those triple wheels, which look great. The fight between it and Chaos 2 is very infamous. It is a beautiful flipping action from Chaos 2. Shiny robot. I love the look of Trident's shiny armor. And of course, it was beautiful seeing it destroyed as well. The triple wheels look great. Everything about Trident looks great. The axe wasn't that effective, and I think that's really where it suffers. Despite it being a semi-finalist, it was definitely one of the weakest semi-finalists because its axe wasn't that effective, and it was a cool looking robot, but effectiveness not so much. It's decent enough though to go into B tier though, and that's what I will say. It's decent enough to go into B tier. Put you there because Centurion had a better axe. So who's this robot? Oh, what is it? Trirobot. I think this is Trirobot. This is the predecessor to Mousetrap. Now, Mousetrap is a fantastic robot. Is it Tritrobot or Trirobot? It's something like that. This robot, on the other hand, it has a goofy face. They at least made an attempt with the design. The design looks decent. Effectiveness was not very good. I don't even know what the hell it was meant to do. Instead, it just caught. It had an internal fire. Something blew up inside. It died. The end. And so it goes into the great design but ineffective category. Yay, another one. I think they were better. I think this is going to be the bomb. Tut's Revenge is another example of a great design, but ineffective. Unlike Tut, which was a very powerful robot that was Egyptian themed, Tut's Revenge, on the other hand, not so much. This is actually the successor to Megahertz, and it's also the predecessor to Megahertz, because Megahertz would return again. It's a unique and fun design, I will give it that. That's about all I can say. It wasn't very effective. It didn't look like it was going to win much. But at least it wasn't too dreadful. That's for sure. I actually prefer it to be there. Speaking of fantastic artworks and fantastic designs which I'd argue might go quite highly in the great design category, but was so ineffective that, Jesus Christ, it's just not worth it. Trun. TWN, TWRN. Trun. This Welsh robot has probably some of the most fantastic artwork you can imagine. Look at the artwork. It looks so gorgeous. However, this died in one hit kill via Trident's very pathetic axe. Trident's pathetic axe managed to knock this robot out in one hit. Yeah. It also caught fire, but surprisingly, the artwork stayed mostly intact. Very beautiful looking robot. It just not very good. I want to put it quite highly in the great design category, even if it wasn't effective at all. Next up is Ultor. Ultor technically hasn't lost a single fight. It won its fight against Big Brother, but because reasons behind the scenes, they decided to say, well, we didn't agree with the judge's decision, so we're going to give the win to you. And they did, and Big Brother went to semi-final while they became a Heat finalist with 0 losses. So Ultor is actually quite a cool looking robot. It actually looks like a big dog head with an axe. I quite like the look of Ultor. Ultor is a very cool looking robot, isn't it? It is a very effective robot as well. Not really much to say. I mean, it was very good, very decent. And very sportsmanship as well. That's another thing. Very sportsmanship. Gonna put it there. Next up is Undertaker, another coffin-shaped robot. Undertaker's design looks quite cool. I will say this. I love the coffin-shaped look of it. Effectiveness-wise, it had a gigantic ground clearance, and its axe did not look like it was going to do much. I think it lost to Panzer in the first round. It was able to move, but it then just got beaten by the floor spike and didn't really do much. Again, great design, not very effective. I'm just going to say it right now. Jesus Christ, there's so many in that one box. Next up is Vector. Is it Vector? Yes, it's Vector. I always get this confused with Victor. Victor's the one afterwards. Vector, great design, didn't work, didn't do anything. Lost it at Series 4 qualified by not working. So in other words, it just wasn't very good. It's a shame because the look of it looks like it's a robot that would have done really well if it actually could work. But it didn't. It's a shame. I'm going to put you right there because you're actually really good looking. Next up is Velociraptor. Velociraptor actually earned its only win in Robot Wars by being in the football and getting a goal. Velociraptor, it's not as good looking as the future editions of Velociraptor. I always think the eyes of the Series 3 Velociraptor looks weird. It's really beady and small. It doesn't look as characteristic as the Series 4, 5 version. But still a decent robot, very speedy, very aggressive. The design, decent enough. I quite like it. Very good for Series 3. Shame it wasn't in the main competition. But still, good robot, decent enough. I'm putting it there. Actually, I'm going to put you above. Actually, I'm going to put you all the way over. I'm actually going to put you right by RoboPig. There you go. Next up is Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix, still not to the Vercingetorix I like, or the Commangetorix I like, but still, this is a slight improvement. I think the color scheme looks pretty cool. It's funny because it actually has a bit of bad language on the front plate, but because it's in Roman, it's obviously didn't go get censored by the BBC and all that. It basically says Julius Caesar, go fuck yourself on the front, which is quite funny. Effectiveness wise, it wasn't very effective at all, and once again, I'm gonna have to put it in the great design, but ineffective. It's a shame, but it's just the way things are. I like you there. Victor returns with a slightly improved design over the Series 2 version. It more or less is the same. It's a very basic looking robot. It's a very odd looking robot. I wouldn't say it was ineffective, but at the same time, it actually damaged itself more than it damaged opponents, which, isn't a very good thing, all things considered. I'm going to put this in D tier because Victor could have been something better, but it wasn't. It's Weedy Wacko. Weedy Wacko is a big Axobot. I quite like Weedy Wacko in a weird way. Weedy Wacko, barrel-shaped robot, big wheels. Couldn't really do all too much, but it wasn't ineffective. Design-wise, it was decent. It's a little bit too short for its own good. It should have been a bit longer. I think that's where Stinger succeeds because it was it made its main weapon the longest part, and the wheels much more the smaller parts. But still, I think Weedy Whacker is a decent enough robot. I think it's an okay robot. It's definitely, middle of the ground area, but it's still okay-ish enough to go into B tier because it wasn't ineffective and it wasn't poorly designed either. Weldor, the first Weldor was actually the most successful Weldor. It got to the second round in the main championship, but in the World Championship, it got to the second round also, actually, coming to think out. Got to the quarterfinals. That sounds much more impressive. But Weldor, I quite like the look of Weldor. Weldor has this military-looking design. It's a round-shaped design. It's got a very flimsy axe, mind you, but it makes up for the lifting forks, which were pretty effective. It was able to lift up 101 quite a few times. I think Weldor, it's great. It's funny because this version of Weldor is still active to this very day, whereas the other versions of Weldor have either been scrapped because Weldor 2 was scrapped. Weldor 3, I don't know what happened to it. Weldor 4, there are pictures of it. It was meant to have been in the reboot, never happened. So, yeah, I mean, this is the only version that's still around, ironically, and it's also the oldest version. Weldor's great. Weldor is very great. I quite like it. I like the sort of tank look of it. It was quite effective. It wasn't too ineffective, though, to, grant it, A tier, but it's effective enough to be in B tier. Wild Willy. This is the predecessor to Cyrax, and you can actually tell that Cyrax is actually just Wild Willy, just with extra armor on it. You just have to look at both robots next to each other, and you can see, the axe is the same. The top bit is the same. Wild Willy, very fast, very aggressive. Its axe was very powerful. It pretty much won its first battle, but it then pitted itself and eliminated itself. So, yeah, poor Wild Willy had a bit of bad luck, really. This is an example of a robot where I actually think it was decent enough. Design-wise, it's very odd. I'm not going to lie, the design is very weird. It's not all great. And I'm a sucker for purple-coloured robots, but this is a little bit too dumb. Poor Wild Willy. I'm going to put it in the effective but not great design category. But I'm actually going to put it right at the top because it's close. All right, the last two, and we got the first version of Exterminator. The first version of Exterminator is radically different to the other versions because the other Exterminators were always silver and blue. This is just red. It's red and blue. And it's weird seeing this compared to the other versions. This version of Exterminator isn't as strong as other versions, although we do see this version of Exterminator more than just Series 3, believe it or not. ICU from Series 6 and Extreme 2 actually use the Series 3 Exterminator, which is fun to think about. Exterminator, decent axe, decent robot, decent design. I think it's all great. I think the colour scheme is pretty cool. I love the artwork it's got on it. Exterminator, obviously, in hindsight, we know is a really good robot, especially the later versions. But still, great first attempt. I think I'm going to put this in A tier because it's not S tier just yet, and that's the problem. It's getting there. Notice that a lot with the A tier. And finally, we have Zeus. So where will Zeus go? Zeus is the final robot of this entire Series 3 ranking, and I am so tired. Zeus is F tier. It's F tier. And I'll tell you why. It's F tier. Zeus, it's not as bad as those ones. Zeus has a high ground clearance, has a really ineffective wedge, really ineffective axe. I think the axe even broke in the fight. It's an ugly looking robot. It was so ineffective. It sucks. Zeus sucks. And what a sour note to end on, all things considered, because we started off really well with an S tier with 101, and then we ended with an F tier with Zeus. But yeah, Series 3 has a lot of variation compared to some of the other ones we've ranked so far. There's a lot of D tier robots which just had a lot of problems, but there's always that saving grace here and there. There's a lot of B tier. These are the more average, but good average ones. That they're more effective, better designed. The A tier is quite interesting because the A tier has a lot of robots which we know are going to be really good. Like it's got Hypno-Disc, it's got Stinger, it's got Exterminator, it's got the Big Cheese, it's got Thermidor. You know, these are robots which are slowly getting to like proper S tier, but they're just missing out, for the time being, which is a real shame. And it is interesting seeing some of these robots like Dark Destroyer or Cerberus, which had really great designs in their first appearance and then just ruined it later on, which is a real shame. But as for S tier, Pussycat, Razor, Chaos 2, gorgeous robots. Detour, absolutely beautiful. I love this version of Detour so much. Firestorm, fantastic. Behemoth, also fantastic. 101, also great. Wild Thing, I meant Thing 2. Thing 2, not as good as Wild Thing, but it is still fantastic. Berserk 2 is probably the biggest outlier here, but I just look at it. It's so gorgeous, and it was so good as well. This is like a robot that could have been in the semi-finals had it had better circumstances. Panic Attack, once again, sort of getting there, but, you know, still beautiful, brilliant robot. Then you have Pitbull, absolutely great robots. Kilohertz, Mortis, and Steg-O-Saw-Us. Those are the best ones of this series. As for the worst, well, Binky. I fucking hate Binky. I really do. Binky just makes me angry whenever I see it. But as for the rest, there's a lot also in the great designs category, because Series 3 definitely had a lot of great designs, but they just weren't very effective. But I hope you enjoyed this tier list ranking. This took ages. I'm sure it's absolutely long. I'm sure most people probably skipped to the end, but who cares? Because I had fun making it. Anyway, I'll see you next time.